Chapter 3961. Burial of Heaven understood Ji Tianxing's nature very well. When it saw the surrounding bright stars, it guessed that Ji Tianxing would stay here and refine those stars. This was because these stars were divine stars that could only be encountered by chance and not by searching for them. The so-called divine star was a star among the billions of stars that was of a higher quality and contained boundless divine power. These stars did not have spatial barriers, which was equivalent to having no protective layer. They could be easily destroyed in the void. Moreover, the divine power contained in divine stars was too violent, so it could not give birth to living things. However, Divine King experts could refine divine stars and obtain great benefits, greatly increasing their strength. Hence, to Divine King powerhouses, divine stars were rarely seen great tonic items. As for the grades of stars, there were actually classifications since ancient times. In the boundless void, there were countless stars, and their number was in the trillions. Among them, 99% were nameless waste stars that could not last long and could be destroyed at any time. However, among the sea of waste stars, there were occasionally larger ones that contained more ores and metals. Just like those stars that Ji Tianxing had refined previously. Stars that were one grade higher than nameless waste stars were called positive stars, and there were nearly a billion of them. Positive stars were stars that were stable in size, quality, and composition. They could not be destroyed easily and could last for a long time. The shortest lifespan was a few 100,000 years, while the longest lifespan was 100 million years. Above positive stars were large stars, and there were as many as 10 million of them. Large stars were stars that were larger in size and often had spatial barriers. They could give birth to the 5 elements, wind and lightning, and then evolve into living things. Just like the countless worlds in the lower realm, they were all considered large stars. Stars that were of higher quality than large stars were divine stars that Ji Tianxing had seen so far, which contained violent divine power. Although divine stars were of high quality, they did not have spatial barriers and could not evolve into living things. They were not suitable for living things to live in. Above divine stars, there were a few 100,000 earthly fiend stars and close to 10,000 Big Dipper stars. For example, in the 9 major galaxies, those stars with countless foreign races living were basically earthly fiend stars. These stars were even larger in size, with a diameter of more than 100 million miles, and could accommodate billions of living things. With Ji Tianxing's current strength and methods, he could spend a few years to refine those earthly fiend stars. However, the prerequisite was that he had to destroy the billions of living beings on the planet. He would never do such a thing. As for the strength star, it was a star that was even larger than the earthly fiend star and of a higher quality. The distant star of the Scorpio galaxy was a Big Dipper star. That star not only had a strong spatial barrier and a stable quality, but it also contained an abundance of divine power. It was the most suitable star for gods to live in and cultivate. Also, above the earthly fiend star and the Big Dipper star, there was still the star with the highest known quality so far. Stars. As the name implied, it was an eternal existence, a star that was almost indestructible. A star of this level had the most stable structure, the most abundant divine power, and the safest environment. It was the holy land for gods to cultivate. For example, the dragon realm and the god realm. Of course, some stars contained too much power and were not suitable for gods to live in. According to ancient legends, there were 99 stars, including the god realm and the dragon realm. However, Ji Tianxing had traveled to all the major star domains, but he had only been able to identify a dozen stars. As for the other stars, he did not know where they were. He wasn't even sure if so many stars really existed. He had reason to suspect that the number 99 was just a figment of the ancients' imagination. 7, 18, 39, 74. Ji Tianxing left the sword of the burial of heaven and stood in the galaxy, looking around and silently counting the number of divine stars. In just a short while, he found more than 100 divine stars in the galaxy around him. Such a harvest is comparable to 2 supreme grade king level divine artifacts. He was excited and gratified. Even if he did not find any clues related to his master in the galaxy, being able to find so many divine stars meant that this trip was not in vain. At the same time, he also believed the news that the blue scorpion divine king had heard. In ancient times, supreme-grade divine artifacts might have really been born in this galaxy. Of course, they were not man-made, but supreme-grade divine artifacts that were born in the galaxy. More than 800 years ago, there might have really been peak god kings who came here and fought over divine stars. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing collected his thoughts and put away the sword of the burial of heaven. He flew toward the nearest divine star. This was a divine star filled with heavenly fire. It was completely red and almost transparent, releasing violent divine energy waves. Ji Tianxing landed on the divine star and felt the violent power of the star. It's almost equivalent to a 9th-level god king. Ordinary high-level god kings can't refine it. Only peak god kings can. This thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately made a judgment. Then, he took out the heaven-mending orb and started to cast a spell. Swoosh! The heaven-mending orb expanded to a radius of 10,000 miles. It floated on the surface of the heavenly fire divine star and released billions of rays of white light that enveloped the entire star. The white light formed a huge net that enveloped the star and quickly devoured it. Thus, the power of the heavenly fire divine star was quickly depleted, and its size gradually shrank. A huge amount of minerals and metals were sent to the 5 elements world by the heaven-mending orb. The endless divine fire and star power were refined by Ji Tianxing to increase his strength and strengthen his foundation of the divine path. Ji Tianxing focused on refining the divine star and forgot about the passage of time. 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, 3 months passed unknowingly. The heavenly fire divine star with a diameter of more than 30 million miles disappeared from the galaxy. The 5 elements world was greatly improved and expanded further. A spiritual energy storm swept through the entire world. Ji Tianxing's strength also increased steadily, advancing toward the late stage of the 9th-level God King. After refining the heavenly fire divine star, he didn't feel tired at all. Instead, he was in high spirits. He flew to another divine star surrounded by lightning and began to devour the second divine star. The power of the thunder divine star was even more violent than the heavenly fire divine star. Ji Tianxing's process of devouring this divine star wasn't smooth. There was an accident. When the thunder divine star shrank by half, the structure of the star became unstable and collapsed. Thus, the peerlessly violent divine power of thunder erupted, exploding into a lightning ball with a radius of 100 million miles. The shocking sound of the explosion could no longer be described as deafening. The nearby divine stars were shaken to the point that they were on the verge of collapse. Some of them were even pushed back millions of miles. If it were any other peak god king, they would definitely be injured by such an accident. However, Ji Tianxing understood the divine stars very well and was already mentally prepared. When the thunder divine star exploded, he instantly took out the primal chaos primordial bell to block the impact of the star's explosion. Although he was pushed back millions of miles, he was unharmed. After the aftermath of a lightning explosion, he continued to devour the third divine star, a blue star that was sealed in ice. This time, the process of devouring was very smooth. There were no setbacks. Just like this, Ji Tianxing continuously devoured divine stars one after another. These divine stars in the galaxy were disappearing at a rate of 4 to 5 per year. Chapter 3962. The feeling of increasing one's strength was exhilarating and exciting. However, the process of increasing one's strength was tedious and long. Compared to other high-level god kings who needed hundreds or even thousands of years to increase their cultivation level, Ji Tianxing only needed a few decades. This was already extremely fast. He was in the depths of the galaxy, devouring divine stars one after another. As time passed, his strength steadily increased, and he gradually approached the late-stage God King realm. 10 years later, He had devoured 42 divine stars consecutively. He had finally reached the late-stage God-King realm. Next, he would break through to the peak God-King realm. At the same time, the five elements world had obtained immeasurable resources and spiritual energy. The entire star had doubled in size. The current five elements world was more than 300 million miles in diameter. However, compared to the God world and the Dragon realm, which were billions of miles in diameter, it was still a little small. However, it was still growing rapidly. As long as Ji Tianxing continued to nurture it with various resources, it would eventually recover to its original size. After Ji Tianxing had refined 42 divine stars, his surroundings became empty. He had no choice but to fly further away and continue devouring divine stars one after another. Although he had reached the late-stage God-King realm, he was still not satisfied. It was not easy to come across so many divine stars of pure quality. He naturally wanted to devour as much as he could. If he missed this opportunity, he did not know when he would be able to find so many divine stars again. Time flew by without a sound. Day after day, year after year. When Ji Tianxing had devoured another 50 divine stars, another 13 years had passed. At this point, he had spent 23 years in the galaxy and had successfully devoured close to 100 divine stars around him. The five elements world had obtained great benefits and was still growing rapidly. Ji Tianxing's strength had increased by several times. However, he was still at the late-stage God-King realm. He had not reached the peak God-King realm. The so-called peak God-King realm was the limit of the God-King realm. However, Ji Tianxing's limit was different from ordinary God-Kings. It was as though he had no limit. His strength could still continue to increase. He even had a premonition that even if he devoured another 100 divine stars, his strength would not reach the limit. He could still continue to increase. Unfortunately, after Ji Tianxing entered this galaxy, he only discovered a few hundred divine stars. Now that he had devoured all the divine stars, he was unable to refine any more divine stars to break through to the peak. The area became empty, and a large number of void storms began to appear. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble and danger, Ji Tianxing had to leave as soon as possible. He controlled the Sword of Burial of Heaven and flew into the depths of the Milky Way to explore more unknown areas. Although the Milky Way was only a few billion miles wide, it could be traversed in 2 or 3 months. However, Ji Tianxing had wandered the Star River for several years and had searched half of it. Regrettably, he did not find any clues about Heavenly Dragon Emperor, nor did he encounter any other divine stars. After traveling for 7 years, he finally left this galaxy. It had been 30 years since he had left the Scorpio star zone. During this time, the Blue Scorpion God King had sent him several messages, reporting the situation in the Scorpion Galaxy. Over the past 30 years, the Blue Scorpion God King had been busy dealing with the affairs of the Scorpion Galaxy. He had handed over half of the star zone that was originally under his rule to a few of his trusted subordinates for the time being. Meanwhile, he had gone all out to take over the territory that had originally belonged to the evil Soul God King. Peace had returned to the Scorpion Galaxy, and the entire galaxy had accepted him as its ruler. His control over the Scorpio star zone had also been greatly improved. To put it simply, he had already completed the mission that Ji Tianxing had given him. However, he did not dare relax. He had to continue working hard to strengthen his control over the star zone. He reported the situation to Ji Tianxing, but did not dare to claim credit. Ji Tianxing was satisfied with his performance. He sent a few words of encouragement and gave him some instructions. Then, the Sword of Burial of Heaven accelerated toward the Sirius star zone in the north. Even from a few billion miles away, Ji Tianxing saw a dense cluster of bright stars in the depths of the void ahead. It was a huge star zone formed by billions of stars. From afar, it looked like a wolf. This was how the Sirius star zone got its name. The situation in this star zone was more or less the same as the Scorpion Galaxy. Similarly, among the billions of stars, there were hundreds of stars that formed worlds inhabited by countless non-humankind creatures. There had never been a peak god king among the natives of the Sirius star zone. The previous domain lord who was in charge of this star domain was a ninth-stage divine king and was known as Mr. Lu. However, Mr. Lu had gone to the Dragon Realm with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor to fend off the Myriad Demon Alliance's attack. Mr. Lu had been killed by Ji Tianxing in the Great Battle. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had also been injured by Ji Tianxing. He had crossed the void and fled back to the Sirius star zone. Since then, Ji Tianxing had not heard any news about the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. However, he did not need to investigate to know that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor must be hiding in the Sirius star zone to recuperate. Moreover, he would take over Mr. Lu's forces and become the ruler of the Sirius star zone. After all, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had already lost the Star Source continent in the Dragon Realm. He could only occupy the Sirius star zone to ensure his power and status, as well as to obtain more cultivation resources. At the same time, it was also his capital to rise again and take revenge. On the way to the Sirius star zone, Ji Tianxing thought to himself, after entering the Sirius star zone, I will definitely come into contact with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. I wonder if he has recovered from his injuries? Are there any clues related to Master in the Sirius star zone? Ji Tianxing did not hate the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, but he did not care about him either. He only wanted to use the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's power to investigate the Sirius star zone. If both parties could sit down and have a good talk, it would be a win-win situation. If the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was stubborn and insisted on fighting him, he would have to torture him again. The Sword of Burial of Heaven hurried through the void, getting closer and closer to the Sirius star zone. Ji Tianxing stayed in the distorted space-time, cultivating in seclusion. He had tried before. Even if he continuously cultivated the 5th level of the heaven-punishing divine art, his strength would increase very slowly. It was so slow that he could not feel his strength increasing at all. Moreover, the increase in strength was more obvious when he devoured the divine star. Based on the current situation, Ji Tianxing would probably have to cultivate in seclusion for tens of thousands of years before he could become a peak god king. He was a little anxious. He could only think of ways to solve the problem and increase the speed of his strength increase. Therefore, he began to study the heaven-punishing divine art, deducing and creating the 6th level of the heaven-punishing divine art. This level of the cultivation technique would definitely be more profound. It contained his understanding of the divine Tao, as well as thousands of laws and mystiques. To put it simply, the 6th level of the cultivation technique would definitely help him cultivate from the late-stage 9th Heaven God King realm to the peak God King realm. He would have to cultivate this level of the cultivation technique for many years. He had to treat it seriously, repeatedly deducing and verifying it. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3963. 3 months later, the Burial of Heaven sword flew into the Sirius star zone. It shuttled between the stars and observed its surroundings. If it discovered any abnormalities or valuable stars, it would notify Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing had been in seclusion for 12 years in the distorted space. Hard work paid off. In the past 12 years, he had studied the heaven-slaying formation. After thousands of experiments, deductions, and verifications, he had finally figured out the 6th level of the technique. Although it was only the embryonic form of the 6th level of the technique, it was still incomplete. After all, it was a supreme technique that he had created himself. Being able to figure out the 6th level of the technique was already a great breakthrough. Ji Tianxing began to cultivate the 6th level of the technique. In just half a month, he had mastered it. After that, he repeatedly cultivated the 6th level of the technique. During his cultivation, he gained more insights and modified and perfected the technique. A few months later, he was awakened by Yun Yao and Ji Ke. After he had finished his cultivation, he realized that everyone was gathered under the bloody flame sacred tree. They were discussing something excitedly. Yun Yao, Ji Ke, Chao Qingyu, Yang Bailong, Ji Wushuang, Qianyu, and Hei Long were all present. Seeing that he had opened his eyes, Everyone gathered around and greeted him with smiles on their faces. Ji Tianxing responded with a smile and asked, "Why are you all so happy? Did something good happen?" Yin Yao nodded and explained, "There is indeed something worth celebrating. Just a few months ago, Bai Long successfully broke through to the Divine King realm. A few days ago, Wu Shuang also broke through to the Divine King realm." Ji Tianxing's eyes lit up. He turned to look at Wu Shuang and Bai Long in the crowd. He realized that they had indeed reached the first stage of the Divine King realm. Not bad. It is indeed worth celebrating. He gave White Dragon a look of approval before looking at Wu Shuang, who was standing gracefully. He said with a heart full of gratification, "Wu Shuang, you have already surpassed your parents and become the world's youngest divine king. Even your brother Wu Hen has been surpassed by you." Indeed, Ji Wuxuang looked like a 14-year-old girl at this moment. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the youngest divine monarch in the world. Being praised by his father, Wu Shuang was naturally filled with excitement. However, she wasn't complacent. She shook her head and said, "Father, although I'm young, I've been cultivating in seclusion here for over 3,000 years. Moreover, my brother's talent and aptitude are not inferior to mine. The reason why I was able to reach the God King realm earlier than him was because I follow my parents and cultivated in the distorted space-time. Her brother definitely did not have such treatment and environment when he was cultivating under the guidance of the Emperor. If he was by our side, he would definitely break through before me." Speaking of Wu Hen, Wu Shuang's eyes showed a sense of longing, and most of his excitement dissipated. Ji quickly held her hand and comforted her. "Wu Shuang, you're not the only one who misses Wu Hen. All of us miss him very much. Don't worry, we're on our way to the heavenly stalwart starfield. We've already waited for so many years. A few more decades won't matter, right?" Seeing the heavy atmosphere, Qian Yu hurried over and said excitedly, "Old Ji, there's another piece of good news." Ji Tianxing turned to look at her and asked, "Who else has broken through to the God King realm?" Qian Yu pointed to another platform thousands of miles away under the sacred tree and said, "That Lin Shui, Sir, God Blood Illusion, and your maidservant Jin Hong have all broken through to the God King realm many years ago." Many years ago, Ji Tianxing had tacitly allowed Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the others to cultivate under the sacred tree without staying in the divine ship. From then on, the few of them had stayed on a platform under the sacred tree and cultivated in seclusion day and night. Anyway, 9 platforms made of divine jade floated around the sacred tree, and the area was very spacious. Cultivating near the sacred tree could be nourished by the divine power of the sacred tree, which was more abundant than the divine power of the God world and the dragon realm. On top of that, Ji Tianxing would take out hundreds of billions of cultivation resources every once in a while and put them on a few platforms for the people to take as much as they wanted. Therefore, the people who cultivated in the distorted space-time were never short of resources. Ji Tianxing originally thought that Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and Jun Hong would probably never have the chance to become God Kings in this lifetime. However, these people had chosen to follow him. Whether or not they were of help to him now, he could not abandon them. Even if he let them cultivate in the distorted space-time, he could afford it. If they did not want to stay here and wanted to go out and explore, he would not stop them. However, he did not expect Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the others to give him a surprise. He extended his consciousness to the platform thousands of miles away and checked on Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and Jun Hong, who were cultivating. As expected, the 3 of them had reached the first level of the Divine King realm, and their foundation of the divine path was stable. Everything was normal. Ji Tianxing raised his head and looked at the lush, bloody flames sacred tree that was tens of thousands of feet tall. He smiled and said, "Originally, with Lin Shui, Jun Hong Bai Long, and Sir God Blood Illusion's talents, it was basically impossible for them to become God Kings. It looks like this bloody flame sacred tree has grown well and brought great benefits to everyone. It has created a miracle." As usual, Chao Qin Yu and Lan were inseparable, holding hands. Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Chao Qingyu smiled and said, Master, this bloody flame sacred tree was originally a Sir God-level divine item. If it were not for your careful cultivation, how could it have grown to such a stage and become an upper king-level sacred tree? In my opinion, if you cultivate it for a few more 100 years, I'm afraid it will become an upper king-level sacred tree. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a smile, I've only heard of upper king-level divine items. I've never heard of an upper king-level sacred tree. Moreover, upper king-level divine items must have Taoist rhymes and contain the power of Heaven Wei. I can provide the sacred tree with the power of Blood Soul. Do I have to instill the power of Heaven Wei into it? I haven't cultivated the power of Heaven Wei yet. Everyone chuckled, and the atmosphere was quite cheerful. Lan'er smiled again and said, Although the sacred tree played a huge role in everyone's ability to break through to the Divine King realm and improve rapidly. However, in my opinion, half of the credit is due to your selfless efforts. Who in this world can live in such a sacred cultivation ground for a long time? And you don't lack cultivation resources? No matter if it's God stones, dawn stones, elixirs, or materials, you can pile them up like a mountain. Any god with decent aptitude would be able to grow quickly under such conditions. The flow of time in the distorted space-time was 50 times faster than the outside world. Although it was dull and monotonous here, it was definitely a sacred cultivation ground for divine spirits. Lan'er's analysis was clear and reasonable. Everyone nodded in agreement. At this moment, Yun Yao glanced at Lin Shui and the others who were thousands of miles away and said gently, Tianxing, you have too many things to do. You might not have time to pay attention to them. However, I've observed them for many years. I can see and feel that they're all holding a breath in their hearts. They want to prove that they're not mediocre and can also become divine king powerhouses. They can play a role and help you. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3964. When they heard Yin Yao say that Lin Shui and the rest were holding their breaths, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Everyone thought that Lin Shui and the rest had been neglected for too long and were angry. Fortunately, Yin Yao then told the whole story, and only then did everyone's heart settle down. Yin Yao continued, There are 9 jade platforms under the sacred tree. The jade platform we are standing on is the best location. Tianxing, Ku, Wushuang, and I have been cultivating here. Bai Long, Qian Yu, and the little black dragon have been cultivating on the jade platform on the left. Chao Qingyu, Yank, and Lan have been cultivating on the jade platform on the right. We're very close to each other. It looks like we are Tianxing's closest and most trusted people. Plus, we have all broken through to the Divine King realm. We are also the most powerful people who can help Tianxing the most. Everyone looked at Lin Shui and Sir God Shui Huan. They've been staying 1,000 miles away on the jade platform furthest away. It looks like they are estranged from us. That's why they are so distant. However, they know that Tianxing has treated them well and brought them great benefits. Hence, they definitely won't be angry. They will only feel ashamed. They will feel that they have enjoyed such a cultivation paradise and consumed countless cultivation resources, but they couldn't help Tianxing. After all, Tianxing is already a peak divine king. Only divine king experts can follow him and help him. Hence, Lin Shui, Shui Huan, and the rest have been cultivating with all their might. They have stimulated their greatest potential in order to break through to the divine king realm. Then, Yin Yao sighed softly and said, They aren't mediocre. They were once geniuses and leaders in their own fields. They aren't afraid of loneliness or being neglected. They are only afraid that they are useless and can't be of use. I am even worried that after a few 100 years, if they still can't break through to the Divine King realm, they might leave. Luckily, they have finally succeeded. Yin Yao looked at Ji Tianxing and said with a serious expression, Tianxing, you should congratulate them and encourage them. After hearing Yin Yao's words, everyone was filled with emotions. But more than that, she admired Yin Yao. All along, everyone had been very respectful to this matriarch. She was as gentle as water, as bright as the moon, and as holy as a fairy. She could be said to be the perfect example of a goddess. Now, Everyone realized that not only did she have so many good points, but she was also observant, considerate, and kind. Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest had been cultivating on the J platform for many years. No one thought that there was any problem. Even Ji Tianxing was ignored. However, Yin Yao could analyze the thoughts of Shui Lin and the others from the minute details. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "You're right. All these years, it was indeed my negligence that gave them the cold shoulder. Actually, I never despised them, nor did I have any other thoughts. I was just busy thinking about my plans, doing my own thing. Forget it, I'll go and have a talk with them. Hopefully, I can relieve their pressure. When everyone was together, they could communicate more and improve their relationship. Because one day in the future, everyone here will help me. It's a very grand and earth-shattering plan." Yin Yao, Ji Ku, and Bai Long all understood what he meant. Chao Qingyu, Yank, and the rest did not quite understand, but they had a rough idea. Everyone nodded solemnly, indicating that they would get along well with everyone. They would also work hard to cultivate and improve their strength. Only Qianyu rolled his eyes and asked softly, "Old Ji, what about Bai Feng? Do we need to improve our relationship with him?" Bai Feng was not present. He was still in the distorted space-time thousands of miles away, cultivating in the cave abode he built. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Bai Feng was captured by me and was forced to work for me. When I return to the God Realm, if the Phoenix clan asks me for him, I have to return him to them." Qianyu nodded to show that he understood. "All right, then there's no need to build a good relationship with him. Anyway, he's so cold and eccentric. We don't like to talk to him." Everyone chuckled. Ji Tianxing stretched out his hand and flicked his forehead. He scolded, "He didn't offend you. Every time you fight with your life. You're not allowed to speak ill of him." Qianyu showed an aggrieved expression, curled his lips, and did not speak. Ji Tianxing waved his hand to signal for everyone to disperse. He got up and flew to the Jade platform thousands of miles away. Swoosh! In an instant, he landed on the Jade platform that was the furthest away. This Jade platform was also within the range of the Bloody Flame sacred tree. But to be honest, the sacred tree's divine power nourishment for this Jade platform was relatively weak. The Jade platform was silent. Lin Shui, who was wearing a white dress and had long hair, Zhan Hong, who was wearing a red armor and was 30 feet tall, and Sir God Blood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary were all cultivating. Blood Dragon and Left Emissary Jean were still peak Sir Gods and were trying to break through the shackles of the Divine King realm. Ji Tianxing used his divine eye to observe for a while. He found that the foundation of the divine path and strength of the two had been accumulated to a very high level. But the two of them lacked some enlightenment and opportunity, so they could not reach the threshold of the Divine King realm. Ji Tianxing thought for a while and decided to help them. Of course, he did not have the ability to help the two of them reach the Divine King realm. The only thing he could do was to send his understanding of heaven and earth, the divine Tao, and the heavenly Tao into their minds in the form of balls of light. If Blood Dragon and Left Emissary Jean could get some enlightenment from his enlightenment, they would have a high chance of reaching the Divine King realm. If the two of them could not comprehend anything, it could only be said that they were not talented enough and were not destined to reach the Divine King realm. Swoosh! Swoosh! Ji Tianxing waved his right hand and sent out 2 walnut-sized 5-colored light balls into Left Emissary Jin's and Blood Dragon's foreheads. Immediately, the two of them who were cultivating in seclusion trembled slightly. Even though their eyes were closed, when they received the massive amount of information, they still felt a sense of pleasant surprise, as if they were being enlightened by rain from the heavens. The two of them frowned, and they soon relaxed. His grave and pained expression also eased and calmed down. Of course, they knew that Ji Tianxing was enlightening them, but they were at the critical moment of breaking through and could not end it immediately. They also did not dare to be distracted and talk to Ji Tianxing. They could only swear that they would reach the Divine King realm successfully and not let Ji Tianxing down. After enlightening Blood Dragon and Left Emissary Jean, Ji Tianxing woke up Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and Zhen Hong. Although the three of them were cultivating in seclusion, they were consolidating their divine path foundation and could end their cultivation at any time. When they woke up and saw Ji Tianxing, they quickly bowed to him. Ji Tianxing replied with a smile. After exchanging some pleasantries with them, he took out 3 sets of medium king level divine artifacts to congratulate them on reaching the divine king realm. Upper king level divine artifacts were too rare and there were not many of them. He could not take out 3 sets, but he had hundreds of medium king level divine artifacts with him. The 3 sets of divine artifacts included weapons, armors, and hidden weapons. There was even a special divine artifact that could save one's life. He had carefully selected them, and they were most suitable for the 3 of them. Chapter 30-965. To Lin Shui, Sir Godblood Illusion, and Zhen Hong, it was already a pleasant surprise that Ji Tianxing took the time to congratulate them. They all knew that Ji Tianxing had a mysterious and important mission. Plus, he had been running around and fighting all year round. He was extremely busy. He didn't have any free time. He didn't even have much time to spend with his 2 wives and daughter. Therefore, they had never thought that Ji Tianxing would actually be concerned about them. Not only did he congratulate them for becoming divine kings, he even asked about their well-being and gave them a few sets of priceless king-grade divine weapons. The 3 of them knew that any king-grade divine weapon, even if it was only a lower king-grade divine weapon, was extremely precious. Ji Tianxing gave each of them a set of middle king-grade divine weapons the moment he took action. Those were treasures that couldn't be bought with tens of billions of divine stones. For other lesser divine kings, in order to obtain a king-grade, low-grade divine artifact, it could be said that they spared no effort and went to great lengths. They had just reached divine king realm, and they already had a set of middle king-grade divine weapons. The 3 of them were pleasantly surprised by such a precious gift. They were very grateful to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing also comforted them indirectly so that they wouldn't feel too much pressure to prevent it from affecting their Taoist heart and divine path foundation. The 3 of them immediately understood that Ji Tianxing had already guessed their thoughts. They couldn't help but feel ashamed. They immediately expressed that they wouldn't let their thoughts run wild in the future. They would also enlighten left emissary Jin and right emissary Blood Dragon. Ji Tianxing was relieved, and he chatted with them about the bottlenecks and problems in their cultivation. After the 3 of them conversed with him and received his guidance and explanation, they all felt as if they had been enlightened and were suddenly enlightened. After that, the 3 of them asked about his itinerary and plans. Only then did they know that he was traveling in the galaxy. Just as Ji Tianxing was chatting with Lin Shui and the other 2, the voice of the burial of heaven suddenly rang in Ji Tianxing's head. There seems to be experts fighting on the star in front of us. Do you want to go over and take a look? At that moment, the sword of burial of heaven had already traveled more than 1 billion kilometers into the Sirius domain. In the surrounding void, there were densely packed, desolate stars, but there were also some scattered stars inhabited by living beings. The planet mentioned by the burial of heaven was a few million miles ahead. It was a world inhabited by living beings. Ji Tianxing said goodbye to Shuelin and Zhen Hong and left the twisted space. Shua. In the next moment, he appeared in the dark void, stepping on the sword of burial of heaven as he advanced. He looked ahead and stared at the dark green planet that wasn't too big. He used his God's Eye mystic technique to observe it. On the planet that was full of vitality and covered in forests, there were indeed some dazzling spots of light. From far away, he could only see some 5-colored lights flickering, but no sound could be heard. But with Ji Tianxing's experience, he was naturally able to tell that those 5-colored specks of light were the divine light of battles between high-level divine kings. Although the divine light was the size of a sesame seed, it was actually tens of thousands of miles wide. Let's go take a look. Ji Tianxing knew that the Sirius domain used to be ruled by Master Lu. Now it was probably in the hands of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. There weren't many god kings on each planet, and high-level god kings were even rarer. Since there were high-level god kings fighting, it was definitely not a small matter. The Sword of Burial of Heaven understood Ji Tianxing's intention and immediately sped toward that planet. Usually, it would take about 6 to 8 hours to cover a distance of 60 million miles. But now, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was flying at full speed and only took 4 hours to reach the planet. What surprised Ji Tianxing was that the battle on the planet wasn't over yet. It had only reached the end, and the battlefield had shifted. The Sword of Burial of Heaven flew toward the flashing divine light. Soon, it arrived above a vast forest. This forest was very large, more than 1,000,000 miles wide. It was filled with towering trees, and the aura of green wood was extremely dense. However, the battle between the two groups of experts had turned the 100,000 miles of forest into ruins. The ground was a mess. Broken tree branches and trunks could be seen everywhere. The ground was also filled with holes and cracks. Ji Tianxing stood high in the sky and kept the Sword of Burial of Heaven. He remained invisible and looked down at the battlefield quietly. There were two groups of foreign race experts on the battlefield. Their clothes were tattered, and their armors were stained with blood. They looked like they were severely injured. One of the groups had a 9th Heaven Realm God King, 4 8th Heaven Realm God Kings, 9 7th Heaven Realm God Kings, and more than 2,000 God Monarchs. On the other hand, there were fewer experts in the other group. There was only 1 9th Stage God King and 16 7th and 8th Stage God Kings. Even though the difference in numbers was huge, in reality, they were evenly matched. It could also be said that both sides suffered losses. Ji Tianxing could guess that the number of people in these two groups was much more than this. Most of them had died in the previous battle. With so many foreign race experts, it was definitely not something that could be gathered from just 3 to 5 stars. These two groups of people were definitely the top forces in the Sirius star field. Ji Tianxing watched the battle quietly. He listened to the shouts and roars of the foreign race experts and obtained some information from them. 15 minutes later, both sides were exhausted and their god powers were depleted. Even if they were bathed in blood and unleashed their divine abilities and techniques, they were no longer as dazzling as before. Both sides found it difficult to continue, and their morale was low. As they fought, they retreated. Not long after, the battle stopped. Both sides stood in the sky above the ruins and faced each other from a few hundred miles away. They took pills and treated their injuries. Among the God King experts on the left, the leader had a human body and a leopard head. He also had a pair of blood-red wings. He wore dark golden armor and held a long spear in his hand. He shouted to the leader of the other group, God King Luo Chun, "You and I have worked together for more than 8,000 years. We were originally comrades who shared a deep friendship. Even though we are serving different masters and have no choice but to fight today, Ben Shuai still doesn't want to kill you. This is our 5th battle, and both sides are still injured. Why don't we call a truce?" The leader of the other group was a dark blue, skinny foreign race man. He was bald and his face was covered in blue scales. He was God King Luo Chun. He looked at the foreign race God King with a human body and a leopard head. He said coldly, "Yin Chuan, you were once a grand marshal under the Domain Lord. You were the bravest and most valiant general. Do you know how much the Domain Lord trusted and valued you when he was alive? As the Vice Domain Lord, I have always worked together with you to share the Domain Lord's burdens. After the Domain Lord died in the Dragon Realm, that foreign race Dragon Emperor came to steal the Domain Lord's foundation. How sinister are his intentions? But you, not only did you not resist with me, you even joined the foreign race Dragon Emperor and became his trusted aide, his top dog. Yin Chuan, I am ashamed to be associated with you when you betray your master for glory. How can you face the billions of people in the Sirius star field? What face do you have to face the Domain Lord's soul in the sky?" Chapter 3966. Godly King Fallout was filled with indignation. The dozen or so godly kings and more than 2,000 godly lords behind him looked as if they had a common enemy. "Traitor! Yin Chuan, you traitor! Even if you were once a grand marshal, you betrayed the Domain Lord. We are ashamed of you. Yin Chuan, you and that alien Dragon Emperor will suffer retribution sooner or later." A few godly kings could not hide their anger as they cursed at godly King Yin Chuan. However, godly King Yin Chuan was not angry. He calmly explained, The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor is our most reliable backer and ally. If not for the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's support for the past 1,000 years, how could the Domain Lord rule the entire Sirius Star Zone? Although the Domain Lord died in the Dragon Realm, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor still holds the Sirius Star Seal. What does this mean? It means that before the Domain Lord died, he entrusted the Sirius Star Zone to the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. Only an expert like the Dragon Emperor can control the Sirius Star Zone and bring peace and tranquility to everyone. Fallout, you incited everyone and led so many people to defect. You said that I am a traitor and that you are the true loyal subjects of the Domain Lord. Ha ha! But in reality, who do you think doesn't know what you are thinking? You are the Deputy Domain Lord. You always thought that after the Domain Lord died, you should succeed him. However, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor wanted to be the Domain Lord and stole your position. Therefore, you harbored resentment and led everyone to rebel and defect. You even pinned the blame on me. Fallout, you are so selfish. For your own benefit, you let so many brothers die with you. Don't you feel guilty at all? The Sirius Star Zone was relatively large. Among the billions of stars, more than 1,000 stars were inhabited by living beings, forming all kinds of worlds. The Sirius Star Seal was an important treasure and keepsake that every Domain Lord had to possess. This item was strangely connected to every world and was also a keepsake that all Star Lords recognized. Even though the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was an alien, as long as he had the Sirius Star Seal, most Star Lords would recognize him. Godly King Fallout did not have the Sirius Star Seal. No matter how much he incited, he could only take away a portion of people and gain the support of a small portion of Star Lords. Upon hearing Divine King Yunchuan's words, Divine King Luochen's expression turned frosty as he bellowed angrily. Bullshit. Yunchuan, you are slandering me. You are slandering me. My loyalty to the Domain Lord can be witnessed by the heavens and the earth, the sun and the moon. I don't mind not being the Realm Master, but I can't let the Realm Master's life's work fall into the hands of that foreign Dragon Emperor. You claim that the governor gave the Heavenly Wolf Astral Seal to the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor before her death. Did you see it with your own eyes? Who else had received the last words or edict of the Domain Lord? Who could guarantee that it was not the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor who had killed the Domain Lord and seized the position of Domain Lord? Moreover, the governor had gone to the Dragon Realm to help the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. It was the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor who killed him. God King Fallout's words received the approval of the soldiers behind him. Many people shouted angrily, cursing Divine King Yunchuan for being shameless and treacherous. Yunchuan could no longer maintain his composure as he finally revealed a look of anger. He bellowed coldly, Luochen, I have fought you 5 times over the past few decades and have also advised you 5 times. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn to this day. I'm not afraid to tell you the truth, but today is the last time I'm advising you. At the same time, this is the last chance His Majesty the Dragon Emperor is giving you. As long as you are willing to surrender, His Majesty the Dragon Emperor will not pursue your crimes for the sake of the peace and stability of the Heavenly Wolf Star Zone. However, if you continue to oppose His Majesty the Dragon Emperor, only death awaits you. God King Fallout sneered disapprovingly. Ha ha! Have you finally revealed your true colors? Are you giving me an ultimatum? Oomph. That foreign Dragon Emperor is severely injured and is still recuperating in seclusion. What can he use to threaten me? Among his lackeys, who else is a match for me besides you? Yunchuan's lips curled into a cold smile. Even if His Majesty the Dragon Emperor is severely injured and has been recuperating in seclusion for decades, he is still a peak God King. To tell you the truth, His Majesty the Dragon Emperor's injuries are almost healed. And at most 10 years, His Majesty the Dragon Emperor will personally take action to take your head. Fallout, on account of our past friendship, Ben Shui has already warned you. I hope you don't make a mistake. Huh? God King Fallout laughed contemptuously. Do you think I'm the same as you? A despicable person who betrays his master for glory and has no sense of loyalty? Get lost. Go back and tell that foreign Dragon Emperor that even if I'm smashed to pieces and my soul destroyed, I will never submit." Divine King Yunchuan frowned as he said with a look of pity, "Falling dust, you are beyond redemption. Forget it. Since you insist on seeking death, Ben Shuai won't stop you. The next time we meet, it will be the day of your death." Yin Xuan snorted coldly and did not waste any more words with the other party. He turned and left with more than 10 God King experts. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone transformed into beams of divine light and rapidly flew into the sky, entering the void. After their figures disappeared, the 2,000 foreign races above the ruins heaved a sigh of relief and let down their guard. God King Fallout did not think too much and hurriedly issued a series of orders. The heavily injured soldiers consumed elixirs and circulated their energy to recuperate. The lightly injured soldiers were responsible for cleaning up the battlefield and counting the number of dead and corpses. At the same time, Ji Tianxing, who had been standing high in the sky and watching silently, also understood a lot from the conversation between the two god kings. "Ha! I thought the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor would quickly take control of the Sirius Star Zone and turn it into his fortress and home. I didn't expect him to be so busy recuperating in seclusion that he couldn't do anything about the situation in the Sirius Star Zone." Ji Tianxing muttered to himself as a playful smile appeared on his face. Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind. "You have basically killed all the God Kings under the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's command. When he fled to the Sirius Star Zone, he was alone and had no one to rely on." Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a smile, "That's true. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor came to the Sirius Star Zone alone and was still able to quickly recruit a group of powerful cultivators to his side and secure his position as the Domain Lord." Burial of Heaven reminded him, "The situation in the Sirius Star Zone is not stable, and the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor has yet to take control of the situation. If you want to take over this Star Zone, this is an excellent opportunity." Ji Tianxing naturally understood what it meant. Support this God King Fallout. Help him defeat the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor and make him the Domain Lord of the Sirius Star Zone. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head and said, "Forget it. I don't have a blood feud with the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor, so I don't have to kill him. Besides, I want to travel to the various star zones and search for clues about Master's death. Taking over the Sirius Star Zone might not bring me many benefits, but I will have to waste a few decades. It's not worth it." Chapter 39:67. Ji Tianxing was willing to spend a few years supporting Blue Scorpion God King to become the Domain Master of Scorpion Star Zone. This was because the Nine Suns God Emperor had instructed God King Changfeng to seize control of Scorpion Star Zone. Ji Tianxing and the Nine Suns God Emperor had an irreconcilable enmity. If the Nine Suns God Emperor wanted to do something, Ji Tianxing would naturally try his best to stop him. However, the situation in Sirius Star Zone was different. He didn't have such a deep grudge with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and didn't want to waste any time. Burial of Heaven was only helping him to come up with an idea. Since he wasn't willing, Burial of Heaven naturally wouldn't say anything more. Before long, the soldiers under God King Luochen finished cleaning up the battlefield and prepared to leave the ruins. Ji Tianxing remained invisible, but he sent a voice transmission to Godly King Luochen, who was in the crowd. "God King Luochen, please wait for a moment. I have something to say." God King Luochen, who was in the middle of giving orders, suddenly froze. A look of surprise flashed across his eyes. He obviously didn't expect someone to be hiding in the dark without him noticing. Moreover, this voice was very unfamiliar. If it was any other God King, they might be on high alert and ask the soldiers to search the surroundings to find out who had sent the voice transmission. However, God King Luochen was more shrewd. He nonchalantly gave the order for the soldiers to return to their base to recuperate. He and the other 4 8-stage realm God Kings stayed behind as they waited quietly. When the 2,000 over soldiers were far away, he calmed down and said in a dignified tone, "Who are you? Why are you hiding and refusing to show yourself?" Ji Tianxing looked down at him and sent another voice transmission. "I'm right above you. It's just that you can't see me. Ask the 4 God Kings to leave as well. I want to talk to you alone." God King Luochun frowned and hesitated. The four God Kings took out their divine weapons and looked around vigilantly. After a while, God King Luochun made up his mind to ask the four God Kings to leave. However, the four refused and tried to dissuade him. Deputy Region Lord, we definitely won't leave. It's too dangerous. That's right. We don't know who the other party is and what their intentions are. We definitely can't let you face them alone. They must be up to no good if they want us to leave. However, God King Luochun had made up his mind and said firmly, they are strangers. What schemes can they have against me? I have a clear conscience, so what's there to be afraid of? You don't have to persuade me anymore. The God Kings couldn't Luochun to Luochun had no choice but to leave. There was God King Luochun to Luochun, was to Luochun to the Luochun to the Luochun to observe him. Luochun didn't care Luochun to Luochun to God Luochun to Luochun. God Lord Luochuns to Luochun, God Luochun. Of course, he had used a type of divine technique that only God King Fallout could see him. Luochun Luochun to Luochun. God King Fallout frowned as he sized up Ji Tianxing and asked in a deep voice, who are you? Why do you want to see me? Ji Tianxing replied calmly, it doesn't matter who I am. I just know what you want. God King Luochun raised his eyebrows. Tell me, I can help you defeat the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and make you the domain lord of the Sirius Star Zone. Ji Tianxing said calmly. He was confident and determined. God King Luochun sneered warily. We don't know each other. Why are you helping me for no reason? Ji Tianxing replied, I have a feud with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Is that reason enough? God King Luochun shook his head and continued to sneer. If you have a feud with him, you can take revenge on him. Why are you looking for me? Ha ha ha. I think you are the ambitious one. You want to use my power to control the Sirius Star Zone, right? Even if you make me the domain lord, I can only be controlled by you and be your puppet. Am I right? This guy is not stupid. He understands the situation quite well. This thought flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind. In fact, he had never intended to do so. He was just testing God King Luochun. Godly King Luochun, you should know that being a puppet region master that listens to me is the dream of countless godly kings. Ji Tianxing looked straight at God King Luochun and said sternly, moreover, I am different from ordinary backers. Other than when I need you to serve me, I will not interfere with you at any other time. God King Luochun frowned and asked, then will you be like the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and make every Star Lord desperately search for resources and hand over large amounts of offerings every 10 years? Don't tell me you won't. Those are resources worth tens of trillions. Who wouldn't be tempted? Ha! Ji Tianxing sneered and said disdainfully, I have an endless supply of cultivation resources. Why should I waste resources and plunder the various worlds? Moreover, I am a peak god king. Apart from king-level supreme-grade divine artifacts, there is nothing else that catches my eye. The tens of trillions of resources you speak of are merely low-level resources. God King Luochun hesitated and seemed to be tempted. He frowned and pondered for a moment before asking, then will you be stationed in the Sirius Star Zone? Will you personally manage the affairs of the Star Zone? Of course not, Ji Tianxing replied. I have more important matters to attend to. I don't have the time to manage these trivial matters. God King Luochun was even more relieved, and his desire to submit became even stronger. However, he still had his doubts and asked again, first, you don't want cultivation resources, and second, you don't want power and status. Then why are you helping me? Moreover, I don't even know where you are from or what your identity is. How can I trust you? Ji Tianxing smiled playfully and said, I am from the Dragon Realm. My Dao name is God King Tianxing. God King Luochun was stunned for a moment before realization dawned on him. No wonder I find you familiar. You are the same as the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Both of you are from the Dragon Realm. God King Tianxing, you have a feud with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor? I get it now. Back then, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor brought the domain lord to the Dragon Realm to seek revenge on you, right? You are the one who injured the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and killed the Domain Lord. With just these two pieces of information, God King Luochun made a prediction and judgment. His expression turned cold, and his body emitted anger and killing intent. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Domain Lord? You're talking about Mr. Lu, right?" "That's right, he followed the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor to deal with me, and was killed by me. However, he is already dead, and the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor took his foundation. Don't you want to avenge Mr. Lu? I can help you deal with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and take back Mr. Lu's foundation." God King Luochun became even more furious as he roared with killing intent. "Wishful thinking. You killed the Domain Lord and still want to use me as your puppet to take away his foundation. How vicious you are. That's right, I want to deal with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and take back the Domain Lord's foundation. However, I will definitely not ask a tiger for its skin and will definitely not cooperate with you. Give up." Chapter 3968. Interesting. Ji Tianxing smiled faintly at the sight of God King Fallout's rage and murderous intent. The cosmos was too vast, and there were trillions of foreign races living in it. There was no unified culture, belief, or moral code here. There was only mutual deception and the law of the jungle. Ji Tianxing had come into contact with so many god kings in the cosmos, and all of them were unscrupulous people who would do anything to achieve their goals. However, this was the first time he had met someone like God King Fallout. "Mr. Lu is already dead. Is it more important to you to become the Protectorate Lord or to avenge him?" Ji Tianxing looked at God King Fallout with a faint smile and continued asking. God King Fallout roared without hesitation. "Of course, it's more important to avenge the Protectorate Lord. I don't care about being the Protectorate Lord." "Oh." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "What's your relationship with Mr. Lu? Why are you so loyal to him?" Divine King Fallout enunciated each word clearly. "He saved my life twice. We are brothers, brothers who exchanged our lives for each other." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "If you're true to your appearance, then you are a man worthy of respect. Don't you want to avenge Mr. Lu? I am right here. You can make your move now." He had already seen through God King Fallout's character. Supporting God King Fallout as the Protectorate Lord would naturally mean that his plan to deal with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor would not work. At this moment, God King Fallout's eyes were spitting fire as he glared at Ji Tianxing. His body was filled with murderous intent as he took out two dark blue short blades and circled around his body. Obviously, he wanted to launch an attack and kill Ji Tianxing, who was right in front of him, to avenge Mr. Lu. He had been accumulating power as hundreds of ideas flashed through his mind, trying to deduce the upcoming battle. However, no matter how he tried to deduce or devise a battle plan, there was only one outcome: defeat. Ji Tianxing looked at him calmly. He didn't even take out the sword of burial of heaven. He stood with his hands behind his back, looking very confident. He frowned slightly when he saw that Godly King Fallout had yet to make a move. He asked, "Why aren't you making a move? Didn't you want to kill me to avenge Master Lu?" God King Fallout's murderous aura was immediately suppressed. His previously ferocious aura immediately receded. His eyes dimmed as he said in a low voice, "I'm not your match." "Haha, at least you know your place," Ji Tianxing chuckled. "But even if you don't kill this prince can easily kill you." God King Fallout gripped his dagger with both hands and placed it in front of him in a defensive stance. "If this battle can't be avoided, even if you're a peak divine king, I have to fight to the death too. Even if I die here, I will have a clear conscience and have repaid the favor of saving my life." Ji Tianxing coldly snorted. Nice words. Then this king would like to see if you dare to face death head-on." A divine aura that could suppress heaven and earth burst forth from his body. An invisible pressure swept toward Godly King Luochun like a stormy sea. Instantly, Godly King Fallout's body trembled from the pressure as intense fear grew in his heart. Even though Ji Tianxing had yet to make a move, Godly King Fallout was already overwhelmed by the pressure. It was as though he was in a sea of blood and corpses, drowning in boundless murderous aura and fear. However, No matter how fearful he was, he refused to take a step back. His eyes remained resolute. Ji Tianqing slowly raised his right palm and formed a sword finger. A resplendent golden sword beam condensed at his fingertips. The 30-meter-long sword beam was unparalleled in its sharpness and dominance. The sword intent of the heavenspan sword could penetrate everything, causing godly King Fallout to clearly feel the arrival of death. In the next instant, Ji Tianqing extended his right hand, and the 30-meter-long sword beam pierced toward godly King Fallout's forehead. Once the sword beam pierced him, he would definitely die on the spot. Even his divine spark would shatter into pieces. Ah! Godly King Fallout let out a sorrowful and furious roar. He desperately struggled to break free from his restraints and resist Ji Tianqing's pressure. He erupted with his most violent strength and brandished his pair of short blades, slashing at the 30-meter-long sword beam. At this moment, just as he had said, he was determined to fight Ji Tianqing with all his strength, even if he had to die. Soon, godly King Fallout was about to die under the sword beam. 80,000 miles away, 4 high-level godly kings saw godly King Fallout being killed by the sword beam and turned pale with fright. They desperately rushed over to help. However, they were too far away and couldn't make it in time. A peak godly king is actually this powerful? I can't even take a single strike from him. Am I going to die just like that? Godly King Fallout looked at the golden sword beam that was constantly enlarging in front of him. He felt the aura of death descend upon him, and this thought flashed through his mind. In the next instant, the golden sword beam arrived in front of him and was only a meter away from his forehead. His breathing and heartbeat stopped. It was as though his thoughts had stopped as well. He even thought that he was already dead. However, the world was silent. The resplendent golden sword beam also stopped in midair, motionless. Godly King Fallout's body froze on the spot. His arms were still holding the short blades high, but he was frozen on the spot like a stone statue. Without a doubt, Ji Tianqing had stopped and spared his life. When Ji Tianqing withdrew his right hand, the resplendent sword beam also dissipated. Only then did godly King Fallout regain his senses. His heartbeat and breathing resumed as he panted violently. Only now did he realize that his entire body was drenched in cold sweat. Why didn't you kill me? He frowned and stared at Ji Tianqing as he asked. Ji Tianqing said with an indifferent expression, "Many supreme Tao warriors have said that the stronger a god is, the more ruthless and selfish they are. In today's world, there are too many heartless, treacherous, and despicable people. It's really rare to see someone as sincere as you. Therefore, I'll spare your life. However, this is the only time." Godly King Fallout looked up at him and roared with a resolute expression. "Even if you spare my life, I won't forgive you for killing the Domain Lord. One day, I'll also become a peak godly king and seek revenge on you. If you're afraid that I'll defeat you in the future, why don't you kill me now and eliminate me completely? Haha, you want to defeat me? Then you'll definitely lose all hope." Ji Tianqing's tone was very confident. Godly King Fallout's expression was ugly as a strong sense of defeat arose in his heart. His opponent was too strong and confident. His aura and sword intent were peerlessly sharp, indeed causing one to lose all hope. That kind of strength was like an ant looking up at a mountain. He couldn't even summon the thought of resisting, especially that sword strike just now. It was the first time in his life that he faced death directly. He would definitely remember that strike for the rest of his life. Both of them were silent for a moment before Ji Tianqing asked, "You were once the deputy domain lord of the Sirius Star Zone, so you know the entire Star Zone better. In the past 1,000 years, have you heard of the Sky Sealing Dragon Emperor? Have you heard anything related to him?" Originally, Godly King Fallout and Ji Tianqing were enemies and couldn't possibly answer this question. However, Ji Tianqing had just spared his life. Godly King Fallout hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell the truth. He shook his head and said expressionlessly, "I haven't heard of him. Moreover, this person shouldn't have appeared in the Sirius Star Zone before." Chapter 3969. Ji Tianqing was a little disappointed by God King Fallout's reply. However, he believed that God King Fallout was telling the truth and would not lie to him. Tens of thousands of miles away, the four High God Kings were rushing over in a hurry. Ji Tianxing decided to leave. However, before he left behind a message for God King Fallout. If you want to take revenge on me, you have to live well and work hard to raise your strength. Don't die at the hands of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. That would be too humiliating. After saying this, Ji Tianxing's figure blurred and soon disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he passed through the spatial barrier and left this star, returning to the cosmos outside the realm. God King Fallout stood in the sky, looking at the place where Ji Tianxing had disappeared. He had a complicated expression and was silent. He had to admit that Ji Tianxing was simply too powerful and too mysterious. Against such an expert, he truly did not have the confidence to surpass him. Before long, the four high-level divine kings all rushed over. They anxiously surrounded God King Fallout, asking him what had happened and whether he was injured. God King Fallout gave a simple explanation of what had happened. When the four God Kings heard that, they were greatly shocked. Their faces were filled with doubt as they widened their eyes. A dragon race god, king dressed in white? Why didn't we see him? He was in front of you the whole time. That golden sword light was unleashed by him. We couldn't see him at all. We didn't sense anyone else's aura either. Seeing the four High God Kings' reactions, God King Fallout was a little dumbfounded and felt even more shocked. Although this was a small matter, an insignificant detail, it also indirectly proved how powerful Ji Tianxing's strength was. Seeing the four High God Kings still discussing enthusiastically, God King Fallout was dispirited and dealt a heavy blow. He waved his hand and said, "Don't mention this again. Let's go." The four High God Kings hurriedly shut up and left with God King Fallout. They also had to keep today's incident a secret. The Sword of Burial of Heaven continued to fly through the void, rushing towards the depths of the Sirius star zone. Ji Tianxing returned to the Sword World and entered the distorted space-time to continue cultivating the heaven-punishing divine art. Burial of Heaven's voice rang out in his mind, asking, "You could have killed him, so why did you show mercy? No matter how confident you are, you shouldn't leave any loose ends behind." Ji Tianxing replied with his telepathic thoughts. "You are a sword spirit. Sometimes you don't understand human emotions and thoughts. Just as I said, the stronger a god is and the higher their realm, the less human and emotional they are. According to what I know, there are many peak divine kings who are emotionless and emotionless like this. They see everyone as ants, and they put benefits first when considering anything. Morality, conscience, loyalty, they were all laughable to them. It's rare to meet someone with a true temperament. Even if he's 90% true and 1 false, I'm still willing to give him a way out. After all, I don't have any blood feud with him. Of course, these were all secondary reasons. The main reason is that I need him alive to continue fighting the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor and create trouble for him." Burial of Heaven transmitted again. "Since you want to deal with the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor, we could just find him and kill him directly. There's no need to go through so much trouble." Ji Tianxing smiled and explained, "Not everything can be solved by killing. Whether I kill the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor or not is up to me. I don't have any reason to kill him now. However, in the future, there might be a time when I can use him." Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment and vaguely understood something. He asked, "Are you referring to the 5 God Emperors and the Dragon Realm?" "Yes." Ji Tianxing nodded and said earnestly, "Even Long, Yin is worried that no one in the Dragon Realm will be able to resist the God Emperor. How can I not consider this? Although these peak God Kings are no match for the God Emperors for now, only these peak God Kings have a slim chance of breaking through to the God Emperor realm." Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, "Therefore, for revenge and to protect the Dragon Realm, you are willing to put aside your personal grudges and look at the big picture." "You can say that." Ji Tianxing nodded. "There are no eternal enemies. The outcome depends on how the situation develops. What about the 5 God Emperors? Is it possible for you to reconcile with them?" Buried Heaven pressed. "Of course not." Ji Tianxing's tone was sonorous and resolute as he said, "My blood feud with them is as deep as the ocean. We are absolutely irreconcilable." Burial of Heaven understood his plan and bottom line and did not say anything else. A month later, Burial of Heaven entered the depths of the Sirius star system. Along the way, it encountered countless abandoned stars, many of which contained large amounts of ores and metals. However, Ji Tianxing was at a critical juncture of comprehending the heaven-punishing divine art, so it did not disturb him. By the time Ji Tianxing perfected the 6th level of the heaven-punishing divine art, and his strength had increased significantly, it had already reached the depths of the star system. Under Ji Tianxing's instructions, Burial of Heaven entered a star inhabited by living beings. This star system was not big and was only medium-sized. There were 7 continents, and more than 800 billion living beings of different races lived in it. Ji Tianxing randomly chose a continent and searched for god kings of different races to find out which star the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was on. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor controlled more than half of the star system. The star master of this star system had long pledged his loyalty to the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. Ji Tianxing found 2 god kings and found out that the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was on the 7 Luminary star. As for the location of the 7 Luminary star, he also found out. In order not to spread the news, he did not kill the 2 god kings. He only made them unconscious for a month. By the time they woke up, it would be too late to report back to the Star Master and ask him to warn the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. By then, Ji Tianxing had already met the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. After leaving this star system, the Sword of Burial of Heaven returned to the void and rushed towards the 7 Luminaries star at full speed. Fortunately, the distance between the 2 stars was not far. Half a month later, the Sword of Burial of Heaven entered the 7 Luminary star. This was a Big Dipper star. Its grade was very high, and its size was also very large. It had a diameter of more than 1 billion miles, and there were more than 10 continents on it. There were countless oceans and trillions of living beings of different races. The place where the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was recuperating was the Divine Palace that Master Lu had built back then. It was the most sacred place on the entire star system. It was in the middle of the star system, above the boundless ocean, in an alternate dimension. This alternate dimension was very rich in god energy. However, compared to the blessed lands of the god world and the dragon realm, there was still a gap. Therefore, this alternate dimension could not be called a blessed land. It was called the 7 Luminaries star realm. The Sword of Burial of Heaven flew for 3 days before it reached the center of the boundless ocean and arrived at the entrance of the 7 Luminaries star realm. The entrance was a huge whirlpool of white light that hung high above the clouds above the ocean. In a vast sea of clouds, there were 4 floating platforms and a few pavilions that served as sentry posts for guards to rest. 2 god kings led 500 divine lord guards to guard the entrance of the 7 Luminaries star realm. Normally, no one would enter or leave the 7 Luminaries star realm. However, everyone who entered or exited the star realm had to go through strict interrogation and inspection. Of course, the guards and commanders guarding the entrance of the star realm were excluded. Chapter 30-970. With Ji Tianxing's strength and methods, he could easily break through the star realm's entrance and kill his way in. However, he knew that the star realm's entrance was heavily guarded, which meant that the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was extremely cautious. If he killed his way in, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor would probably flee when he heard the news. The Sirius Star Zone was so big. If the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor escaped, it would be extremely difficult to find him again. Currently, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was not on guard against his arrival. Therefore, he could not expose himself yet. He had to catch the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor off guard. Ji Tianxing hid outside the Star Realm's entrance and patiently waited for an opportunity to sneak in. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 10 days passed in a flash. On the morning of the 11th day, a team of God King experts flew over the sea. There were more than 10 God King experts in this team. Their leader was a 9th stage God King with a leopard's head, a pair of blood-colored wings, and dark golden armor. The 10 over-god kings behind him were all in the 8th-stage realm, 7th-stage realm, and 6th-stage realm. Logically speaking, such a team of god kings would definitely be the top fighting force in the Sirius star zone. However, these god kings did not look awe-inspiring. In fact, they looked rather miserable and wretched. All of them were either lightly or heavily injured, and they looked very tired. Tianxing recognized them at a glance. The leader of these god kings was the Grand Marshal of the Sirius star zone, God King Yinchuan. Previously, these god kings had fought with God King Luo Chun and issued an ultimatum. After they left, Tianxing went to talk to God King Luo Chun. Logically speaking, they should have returned to the 7 luminaries star zone first. However, their strength was lower and their speed was much slower than Tianxing's. This was why they were late, even though Tianxing had been in the 7 luminaries star zone for 10 days. Tianxing's eyes lit up when he saw God King Yinchuan and the others. He remained invisible and concealed his aura as he quietly crept over. He wanted to follow one of the god kings into the 7 luminaries star realm, like how he had snuck into the Xuanji grotto heaven years ago. He was already familiar with this kind of thing and had rich experience. However, Yinchuan and company had never experienced such a vicious beating, so they were naturally unprepared. When the guard commander guarding the entrance saw Yinchuan and company return, he hurriedly went forward to welcome them. After verifying the identity medallions of the god kings, the guard commander bowed respectfully and flattered them. However, Yinchuan and company thought nothing of it. They swaggered into the white vortex. Swoosh! Swoosh! In a flash of white light, a dozen or so god kings entered the 7 luminary star realm to report to the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. No one knew that Tianxing, who had turned into dust, had followed this group of god kings into the 7-star star realm. The 7 luminaries star realm wasn't very big. It only had a radius of 300,000 miles. The scenery inside wasn't bad. Clear water, green mountains, and abundant divine power. It was quiet and peaceful. However, Tianxing had seen too many paradises in the dragon realm and the god realm. When he looked at this kind of environment again, he felt that it was extremely boring. There was nothing to say. Yinchuan and company flew for hundreds of thousands of miles and reached the depths of the star realm. In a towering mountain range, there was a resplendent palace complex. The hundreds of palaces looked very majestic. However, the architectural style and decoration style had the characteristics of other races. It looked a little strange. More than 30,000 godly beings of other races lived here. Just the Divine Lord Realm Guards numbered more than 5,000. As for the Godly Monarch Realm experts, there were more than 60 of them. For a Starfield Lord, this level of strength and foundation was considered strong enough. However, Tianxing believed that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor would definitely feel aggrieved. The scale of strength and the simple environment were incomparable to the mysterious Grotto Heaven. Therefore, the Lord of the Stellar Domain was still incomparable to the position of Dragon Emperor in the Dragon Realm. Yinchuan and company entered the palace complex and landed in front of the tallest and most majestic palace. This 7 luminaries divine palace was the residence of the Lord of the Stellar Domain. It was also the place where important matters were discussed. Yinchuan got the others to return to their residences to recuperate. He entered the 7 luminaries divine palace alone to report to the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. After the dozen or so godly monarchs bowed and bade farewell, they dispersed. Tianxing hurriedly followed Yinchuan and silently entered the 7 luminaries divine palace. There were more than 1,000 divine lord guards inside and outside the palace. There were also 6 godly monarch experts presiding over the place. It could be said to be heavily guarded. Even though Yinchuan was the Grand Marshal and a trusted aide of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, he still had to go through numerous checks before entering the palace. As for Tianxing, he was still an invisible speck of dust. He stuck to Yinchuan's armor and did not attract any attention. Moments later, Yinchuan passed through a winding corridor and entered the depths of the palace. He passed through a dark passageway and arrived outside a secret chamber underground. This secret chamber was constructed using extremely precious materials. It was extremely sturdy, safe, and concealed. Yin Chuan stood outside the secret chamber and waved his hand to dismiss the two guards at the door. Then, he bowed at the secret chamber's door and reported, "Your Majesty, Dragon Emperor, Yin Chuan has returned to report." The secret chamber was extremely quiet. Moments later, a deep male voice sounded. "Yin Chuan, what was the outcome of your battle with Luochen? Were any of the generals injured or sacrificed? Did that renegade, Luochen, know his wrongs and repent?" Yin Chuan maintained his bowed posture and reported the situation truthfully. Ji Tianxing had already left his armor and reverted to his dragon race youth appearance. He stood by the side and listened silently. Although he was only 3 steps away from Yin Chuan did not notice him at all. After hearing Yin Chuan's report, he learned that there were more than 20 godly monarchs on the mission. 6 godly monarch experts had perished in this battle. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's voice sounded from the secret chamber. It contained a tinge of anger and killing intent. He bellowed coldly, "This emperor is benevolent and has repeatedly given him the chance to repent. However, he has rejected it every time. Since he insists on seeking death, don't blame this emperor for being heartless. All right, Yin Chuan, all of you perform very well. Retreat and enter seclusion to recuperate. In another 10 years, this emperor will leave seclusion after a full recovery. When that happens, this emperor will heavily reward all of you loyal subjects. As for Luochen and the rebels under him, this emperor will eradicate them all." Yin Chuan hurriedly bowed and thanked him before taking his leave. The dark passageway regained its silence. There was also no movement in the secret chamber. At this moment, Ji Tianxing raised his hands and conjured a divine art, using an array Dao divine power. Swish! 2 golden beams of light spread out and formed a light barrier in the blink of an eye that enveloped the secret chamber. The golden light was invisible and was not detected by the guards outside. However, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor in the secret chamber sensed something amiss. Ji Tianxing finished his art and sealed the area, preventing others from probing the situation. Before he could open the door to the secret chamber, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's voice sounded from inside. "Long Tian, if this emperor is not wrong, you are here." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's tone was low and cold. However, there was no shock or panic. Clearly, he had sensed Ji Tianxing's existence before Yin Chuan left. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3971. Although the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was not as powerful as Ji Tianxing, he was still a peak god king. Moreover, he was a dragon emperor with more than 20,000 years of experience. He was a shrewd dragon emperor. Even though he had yet to recover from his injuries, he was not to be underestimated. Ji Tianxing was surprised to hear the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's voice. However, he was not shocked. It would be disappointing if the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor did not notice that he was already at the door of the secret chamber. Moreover, he had set up a large formation to isolate the secret chamber. Those outside would not be able to see what was going on in the secret chamber, nor would they be able to hear what was going on in the formation. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was familiar with his aura. When he saw the formation, he could guess who he was. "Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, how have you been?" Ji Tianxing smiled and greeted the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor as he looked at the door of the secret chamber. "Aren't you going to open the door of the secret chamber and invite me in? This is not the way to treat a guest." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's voice rang out from the secret chamber with a hint of sarcasm. "You sneaked in without notifying me and even set up an isolation formation. This is not the way to treat a guest either." Ji Tianxing was not angry. Instead, he said calmly, "I set up the formation to isolate this place because I have something to say to you in private. I do not want to be disturbed by others." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's voice rang out again with a hint of cold, killing intent. "What is there to talk about between us? Didn't you deliberately come here to kill me and eliminate the source of the problem?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and smiled. "How can you be so sure? As the saying goes, there are no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. There is no deep hatred between us. Why must we fight to the death? The secret chamber was silent for a moment. Then, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor asked cautiously, "Are you really not here to kill me? Whether I kill you or not depends on you. As of now, I have no intention of killing you." Ji Tianxing answered honestly. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor fell silent again, as though he was considering. After that, the door of the secret chamber opened to both sides with a soft creaking sound. After the door was opened, a dense five-color divine power spread out from the secret room. Ji Tianxing calmly looked into the secret room. He saw that there were many bookshelves, tables, chairs, and luxurious decorations in the room. The floor was engraved with divine formation patterns, and the walls were covered with exquisite carvings. There were also many secret compartments for storing treasures. In the secret room, there was a bed made of divine jade, as well as a five-colored pool formed by the condensation of divine power. In short, everything a God King needed to cultivate was prepared in this secret room. In the center of the secret room, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was sitting cross-legged on the formation altar. He wore a golden robe, had his hair tied up in a bun, and wore a golden dragon crown on his head, even though his expression was calm and his aura was steady. However, in reality, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was staring at Ji Tianxing intently. His heart was filled with caution and vigilance. On the surface, the secret room looked peaceful and peaceful. In fact, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor had already activated a few divine formations to guard against Ji Tianxing's attack. He was also preparing to escape. Ji Tianxing looked around the secret room. He stepped into the secret room with a playful smile on his face. "I'm so sincere, but you're so wary of me. You don't have the bearing of the Dragon Emperor." Without a doubt, he had already seen through the hidden formations in the secret room. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor stared at him expressionlessly and said in a low voice, "Others have the right to say such things, but you don't. I am no longer the Dragon Emperor. This is all thanks to you. If you did not use tricks to take over the Star Source continent, would I still be here?" Ji Tianxing did not want to continue this topic. He asked again, "It has been a few decades. Your injuries should have recovered soon, right?" It would have been better if he did not mention this. The moment he did, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's face fell. His eyes were filled with cold light. "This Emperor's injuries were also caused by you. Did you come here today just to mock this Emperor to my face? Humph. Even if my injuries have not recovered, I am not afraid to fight you again." Ji Tianxing stood in the secret room and looked at the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. He waved his hand and said, "All right, I know you have not recovered from your injuries. Don't force yourself. In fact, even if you have recovered, you are still not my match. If we really fight, you will only be more severely injured. You might even lose your life." The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. His face turned black, but he could not refute. He knew that Ji Tianxing was speaking the truth. Moreover, he did not waste his breath on Ji Tianxing. "What do you want?" Ji Tianxing said calmly. "Nothing much. I just want to have a chat." "Huh?" The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor sneered expressionlessly. "The situation in the Star Source continent has just stabilized. You just took control of the situation and you can't wait to find me. Do you think that this Emperor will believe your nonsense?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said, "I didn't expect you to be paying attention to the situation in the Star Source continent, even though you are in the Sirius Star Zone. It seems like there are still some forces in the Star Source continent who are secretly sending you information." The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor sneered. "So what? I have controlled the Star Source continent for almost 10,000 years. Do you know how deep my foundation is? Even if I've lost my power, I still have many loyal followers. However, don't think that you can force me to betray those forces and experts who are loyal to me." Ji Tianxing thought for a while and said seriously, "Although I am not interested in the position of Dragon Emperor and have no desire for power and status, I have already obtained it. However, this prince would never spit out what was already in his hands. Therefore, if you want to take revenge on me and plan to take back the Star Source continent, you should give up now." The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor immediately understood what he meant. He asked, "So you said that whether you kill me or not depends on my choice. Your so-called choice depends on whether I want to take revenge on you and take back the Star Source continent?" Ji Tianxing nodded. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor asked again, "What if I hate you to the core and have been plotting how to get rid of you and take back the Star Source continent? What will you do?" "Then I will kill you now to prevent any future troubles," Ji Tianxing answered without hesitation. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor frowned and stared coldly at Ji Tianxing. His expression was very serious and guarded. At this moment, his emotions were a little complicated. Hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind. He really wanted to fight with his life on the line. He wanted to use the divine formation in the secret room and his trump card to kill Ji Tianxing. However, the problem was that he was not confident at all. He did not even have 20% confidence. Once he made a move and failed, what awaited him would definitely be death. This was because he had seen through Ji Tianxing and knew that Ji Tianxing was a man of his words. He was hesitating and weighing the pros and cons. However, after a long while, he gave up on that dangerous thought. His anger and killing intent dissipated. Chapter 3972. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was very experienced and shrewd. He had come into contact with countless experts from the Dragon Realm and the Outer Realm. He believed that he had a pair of eyes that could see through people's hearts. He also had the courage, means, and strategy to control all kinds of experts. Because of this, he could easily take over Master Lu's foundation and become the domain master of the Sirius Star Zone, attracting the loyalty of countless Star Lords. However, when he faced Ji Tianxing, he felt deeply powerless. It was not that Ji Tianxing was too shrewd, scheming, or brilliant. On the contrary, Ji Tianxing had fought with him so many times and had not used any tricks. Moreover, Ji Tianxing was a very perceptive person. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor had seen through him long ago. That's right, his evaluation of Ji Tianxing was perceptive. He acted straightforwardly and had a clear Tao heart. He did not rely on schemes to conquer the world. Instead, he relied on open schemes and powerful strength to crush everything. In the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's opinion, this kind of person was the most difficult to deal with. If other Peak God Kings felt that he was still useful, they would definitely feign civility and scheme against him. However, Ji Tianxing was different. If he really attacked Ji Tianxing, he would only be digging his own grave. Ji Tianxing would not care about the consequences, let alone whether he was still useful or not. Therefore, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor, who had made up his mind, sighed silently. Over the past few decades, while I was in seclusion to heal my injuries, I thought about many things. I even looked back at the first half of my life and gained many insights. Ji Tianxing looked at him calmly and asked, "What insights?" The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's expression was indifferent. He sighed and said, "Wealth, fame, and fortune are all worldly possessions that can be easily obtained. Only one's own life is the most important thing. Only powerful strength and a higher cultivation realm are the only things that one can pursue. I have been the Dragon Emperor for so many years and enjoyed too much wealth, fame, and power. I have long grown tired of it. As of now, I no longer have any desires. My only obsession is to surpass the Divine King realm and pursue a higher realm." Ji Tianxing did not interrupt him. He nodded slightly, indicating for him to continue. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor continued, "If I stay in the Dragon Realm, even if I'm the revered Dragon Emperor, I won't have any hope of breaking through. However, in the Sirius Star Zone, I still have a slim chance. Although I have lost the Astral Source Continent, I still have a Sirius Star System. There are enough cultivation resources to support my cultivation. If there are no accidents in the future, I will stay in the Sirius Galaxy and work hard for this goal for the rest of my life. I will never return to the Dragon Realm." In other words, he would not take revenge on Ji Tianxing or snatch the Star Source Continent. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but applaud for him. He praised from the bottom of his heart. "You're indeed the Dragon Emperor. You can even say that you're afraid in such a fresh and refined way. Your realm is so high that it's really admirable." The gold origin dragon emperor frowned and glared at him angrily. Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, "All right, there's only you and me here. Stop acting all high and mighty. I won't fall for it. If you were stronger than me, you would have killed me long ago and taken back the Star Source continent. Why are you still acting all high and mighty?" The gold origin dragon emperor was speechless, because what Ji Tianqing said was the truth. The golden origin dragon emperor glared at Ji Tianqing and asked in a deep voice, "So, you came to look for me today, to ridicule me and make a fool out of me?" "Of course not." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said earnestly, "I'm here to enlighten you and ask for your help." "Enlighten me? Ask for my help?" The gold origin dragon emperor frowned and sneered. "I've already thought it through and made up my mind. What's there to enlighten me about? As for asking for my help, I have a huge grudge against you. Why would I help you?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Let's talk about the help later. I'll enlighten you first. Even though most of what you said just now is false, I'm sure you're right. I hope you will treat it as the truth and carry it out. Otherwise, not only will you not be able to take back the Star Source continent, but you will also die under my sword. There are only a few dragon emperors in the dragon realm. It's not easy for a peak god king to grow. Therefore, you must cherish your life and not seek your own death. Only by living can you surpass the God King realm and reach the God Emperor realm." God Emperor realm? The gold origin dragon emperor's body trembled. His pupils contracted and shone brightly. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's a higher realm after surpassing the God King realm. Currently, there is no God Emperor in the dragon realm. However, there are already 5 in the God realm. There are God Emperors in the God realm? 5? This news had a huge impact on the gold origin dragon emperor. He lost his composure on the spot, and his face was filled with shock. Ji Tianqing nodded again and said earnestly, "You are not popular in the dragon realm. The other dragon emperors don't want to bring you along. Therefore, there are some secrets that you don't know. However, I can tell you today so that you won't be in the dark for so many years. If you don't know these secrets, you will never surpass the God King realm." Ji Tianqing was a junior. Compared to the gold origin dragon emperor, he was much younger. His tone was like that of a senior advising a junior. However, the gold origin dragon emperor didn't mind. He looked at him expectantly. He only wanted to know what his so-called secrets were. However, after waiting for a while, Ji Tianqing didn't say anything else. The gold origin dragon emperor couldn't help but urge, "What secrets? Tell me quickly." Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes. "Do you want me to stand and tell you a story? You didn't even prepare a table, chairs, or tea. You have no sincerity at all." The gold origin dragon emperor was stunned. He hurriedly shot out a beam of golden light and took out a luxurious table and chairs made of divine jade. He invited Ji Tianqing to take a seat. Then, he took out a tea set and poured a pot of supreme-grade divine tea for Ji Tianqing. The gold origin dragon emperor lowered his status to serve Ji Tianqing because the temptation of breaking through to the God Emperor realm was too great. That was the obsession of every peak God King. It was more important than their lives. For this goal, the gold origin dragon emperor didn't feel like he had lost anything. Ji Tianqing sat on the luxurious jade chair and sipped his tea. Then, he said slowly, "You also said that if you stay in the dragon realm, you won't have any hope of breaking through to the God Emperor realm. That's true. However, you don't know why." The gold origin dragon emperor nodded. "Indeed, I heard that the dragon realm seemed to have been punished by the heavens. Therefore, it's impossible for anyone to surpass the God King realm. What's going on? Do you know the reason?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "As for the specific reason, I'll have to start from the ancient era. At the end of the ancient era, a battle of gods broke out in space. Countless gods were involved." Chapter 3973. After that battle, a great era came to an end. The dragon realm was also sanctioned by the heavenly Tao. Many demons became sinners. For example, the Phoenix tribe and the Qilin tribe, who had disappeared a long time ago. Even the dragon tribe, the golden crow tribe, the Cheongqi tribe, and the Tautai tribe became sinners, the sinners quickly withered until they fell and perished. The dragon tribe was the most powerful and could reproduce easily. That was why they were able to drag on until now. However, if you observe carefully, you will realize that the dragon tribe is getting worse with each generation and will eventually decline. In the end, the dragon tribe will lose their position as the overlord and be replaced by other tribes. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had only heard some minor details about what Ji Tianxing had told him. He did not know the details. Now that he had heard everything, he nodded and sighed. So that's how it is. It's no wonder that I couldn't nurture another Dragon Clan expert, even after spending so much effort and endless resources. Since that's the case, I should be able to break through to the God Emperor stage if I stay in the Heavenly Wolfstar Zone. After knowing this secret, his desire to return to the Dragon Realm and take back the Star Source continent faded a little. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said with a frown, "How can it be that simple? The other Dragon Emperors all left their avatars in the Dragon Realm to manage the affairs while their true bodies went to the outer realm to cultivate. However, 1,000 years have passed. Have you seen anyone showing signs of breaking through to the God Emperor stage?" "I have not." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor thought for a moment and asked, "Then why are there 5 God Emperors in the God Realm? Is it because the God Realm was not punished by the Heavenly Tao?" Ji Tianxing explained, "The God Realm was not punished by the Heavenly Tao only partly. More importantly, one needs an earth-shattering opportunity to break through to the God Emperor stage. Without that opportunity, no one will be able to break through." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's eyes lit up even more. Even his breathing quickened. "What opportunity?" Ji Tianxing glanced at him and did not answer. He only picked up his teacup and drank tea. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was even more anxious now as he hurriedly urged. Ji Tianxing chuckled. "Golden Dragon Emperor, I know what this opportunity is, and I also possess it. In the future, among the peak divine kings of the Dragon Realm, I will definitely be the first to break through to the God Emperor realm. However, I only told this secret to the Black Dragon Emperor, the Red Dragon Emperor, and the Sacred Dragon Emperor, because they're all my good friends, elders, and brothers that I can trust. As for you, we're not that close yet." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was stunned. Soon after, he revealed an awkward smile and nodded. "I was careless. I could only casually reveal such an important secret. With your relationship with me, I wouldn't believe you even if you told me. It's good that you know your limits." Ji Tianxing smiled and said meaningfully, "Although I can't tell you now, it will depend on your performance in the future. Perhaps I will tell you." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor frowned as he stroked his beard and sneered. "What? You want to use this secret to trick me into pledging my loyalty to you? This kind of trick is too childish." Ji Tianxing pursed his lips and said, "I don't know if it's true or not. Then you can wait for the news of me breaking through to the God Emperor realm. As for pledging my loyalty, don't make it sound so bad. Even if you want to join me, I will only treat you as a friend and not a servant or subordinate. Look at the Black Dragon Emperor, the Red Dragon Emperor, and the Sacred Dragon Emperor. I am very close to them. Have I ever been subordinate to them?" The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was silent, but he was a little tempted. To be honest, compared to the position of Dragon Emperor in the Stellar Source continent, the opportunity to break through to the God Emperor realm was more attractive to him. Ji Tianxing could tell that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was a little tempted, so he continued to persuade him. "As a peak divine king, you are already standing at the top of the Dragon Realm. Your vision and knowledge cannot be limited to the Dragon Realm. Otherwise, you will not be able to improve. You should look beyond the outer realm. Only this vast and endless void can help you break through to the God Emperor realm." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor nodded to show that he understood and understood, but he still had doubts and asked directly, "Long Tian, how do you know that there are 5 God Emperors in the divine world? And how do you know these secrets?" Ji Tianxing explained, "Don't forget that I left the Dragon Realm more than 1,000 years ago to cultivate in the divine world. I only returned to the Dragon Realm a few decades ago. As for these secrets, most of them were found out by my master, the Sky-Sealing Dragon Emperor. 1,000 years ago, My master already knew these secrets and was looking for a solution. Because of this, he sacrificed himself. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was enlightened and sighed. I see. No wonder the Sky Dragon Emperor disappeared for no reason at his prime. In the past, I treated him as an elder and respected him from the bottom of my heart. But I didn't expect Senior Sky Dragon to be so noble, sacrificing himself for the people of the Dragon Realm. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was flattering the Sky Dragon Emperor to get closer to Ji Tianxing. This method was very effective, but it wasn't annoying and wouldn't make him look like he was groveling. After a moment of silence, he tried to ask again. Long Tian, these secrets are very important, especially the fact that you have the opportunity to break through to the God Emperor realm. This is a shocking secret. If it were anyone else, they would hide it and wouldn't reveal it easily. Why do you want to tell me? Aren't you afraid that I'll reveal it? That I'll bring disaster to you? Ji Tianxing smiled disapprovingly. Other than the 5 God Emperors, no one in this world can kill me. Even if you want to reveal this secret to the 5 God Emperors, you won't be able to see them. Moreover, if you kill me, it won't do you any good. But if you're on good terms with me, you'll have a chance to break through to the God Emperor realm like the Red Dragon Emperor, Black Dragon Emperor, and Sacred Dragon Emperor. As long as you're not a fool, you'll know what to do. When you break through to the God Emperor realm, you'll help all the other Dragon Emperors break through to the God Emperor realm. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was shocked and couldn't believe it. He didn't believe that anyone would be so selfless. At least, he definitely couldn't do it. Ji Tianxing nodded and said seriously, I know you don't believe me, but this is indeed my plan, because I want to save the Dragon Realm and change the fate of the Dragon Realm. And this is a huge mission that I cannot accomplish alone. I need your support and help. What do you mean? The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was shocked again. You want us to help you resist the Heavenly Tao's punishment and help the Dragon Realm get rid of the heavenly punishment? That was ridiculous. Which living being in this world dared to resist the will of the Heavenly Tao? Ji Tianxing said seriously, not only to get rid of the heavenly punishment, but also to resist the 5 God Emperors of the divine world. They're crazily plundering the resources of the divine world and the outer realm. They even want to occupy and enslave the Dragon Realm. If we don't work together to resist, how can we resist the invasion of the 5 God Emperors? Could it be that you want the Dragon World to become their mine, a beast pen for slaves? Chapter 3974. The 5 God Emperors of the God Realm are actually plotting something like this? The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was even more shocked and in disbelief. This was the first time he had heard of the 5 God Emperors of the God Realm. He did not know anything about them at all. Therefore, even though Ji Tianxing spoke with a solemn expression, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was still skeptical. Ji Tianxing explained in a low voice, although you have not met the 5 God Emperors, you should know that the domain masters of the 9-star domains are all godly kings of other races. However, in reality, they all have powerful backers behind them. Unfortunately, the 5 great God Emperors had all supported the Puppet Region Master, who controlled quite a few star regions. The 5 God Emperors have extremely high standards and look down on those star domains. However, they treat those star domains as mines and enslave everyone in those star domains to plunder cultivation resources. The God Realm has long been enslaved by the 5 God Emperors. The other star domains cannot escape this fate. Then, what do you think the 5 God Emperors' next target will be? Hearing this, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor felt that it made sense and could not help but nod. However, he was still confused and asked, they're already God Emperors. Why are they still plundering cultivation resources? Those low-level cultivation resources are not of much use to them, right? Ji Tianxing smiled and explained, they are not plundering endless cultivation resources for cultivation. Of course, they are doing it for another earth-shattering plan. I know a little about that plan, but I have not investigated the details. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor subconsciously wanted to ask if he could give a general idea. However, he thought about it again. Ji Tianxing would definitely not tell him such a secret. Even if he asked, he would only be asking for a rebuff. After a moment of silence, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor continued. All right, even if I believe you, the five god emperors will invade the dragon realm and enslave all the people of the demon race. However, what does this have to do with me? From now on, I will stay in the Sirius Star Zone and will not return to the dragon realm. Tianqing sneered. It has nothing to do with you? Ha! When a nest is overturned, how can any egg remain intact? The five god emperors will enslave the god realm, the dragon realm, and the 9 galaxies. Hiding in the Sirius galaxy is useless. Besides, you are also a senior and expert of the dragon clan, the great dragon emperor. Even if you don't return to the dragon realm, don't tell me you don't have friends and relatives in the dragon realm. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor said expressionlessly, I don't have a wife or children. I don't care about the lives of others. Humph, cold-blooded and heartless indeed. Tianqing sneered contemptuously. In the end, you're just afraid of death. You only know how to curry favor with those in power, and you don't dare to fight back. Even if you were once the Dragon Emperor, you no longer have any backbone and dignity. A pitiful worm like you doesn't have a right to become a god emperor. Tianqing's scolding was very unpleasant, but the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor endured it. He was neither angry nor refuted. In short, he was not going aboard Tianqing's pirate ship. Thinking about it carefully, Tianqing did not kill him because he wanted to rope him in. He did not have to pay anything to know these secrets. This was definitely a great deal. However, Tianqing's next sentence left him dumbfounded. Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, there's no use pretending to be a coward in front of me. I've said what I wanted to say. Now, you have to make a stand. You should know that I didn't come here to chat with you today. Seeing that Tianqing's expression had changed, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor hurriedly changed the topic. Long Tian, you said that you came here today for 2 things. The first was to enlighten me, and the second was to ask for my help. Now that you're done, tell me what you wanted help with. Tianqing waved his hand and said with a smile, We'll talk about the help later. It's time for you to make a stand. Remember, you only have this one chance. Either you join us and save the Dragon Realm together and fight against the invasion of the 5 god emperors, or I'll kill you right now. Since you're not willing to save the Dragon Realm, you're of no use to me. I'll just kill you. As he spoke, he emitted a cold, murderous aura that filled the entire secret room and enveloped the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor could clearly sense that Tianqing was much stronger than he was a few decades ago, at least several times stronger. Back then, he was already no match for Tianqing. Now, it would be even easier for Tianqing to kill him. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor glared at Tianqing and shouted angrily, Long Tian, you've gone too far. Even if I'm no match for you, you won't have an easy time if I fight with all my might. Tianqing sneered disapprovingly. Since that's the case, what are you waiting for? I've recently made great progress and want to kill a peak god king as a sacrifice to my sword. Then his fingertips lit up with a dazzling golden light and emitted a violent sword intent. The formless sword intent locked onto the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and went straight for his mind and godhead. Instantly, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor felt a chill run down his spine as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Seeing that Tianqing's aura was rising, the 3-foot-long sword light at his fingertips was about to explode. In the next instant, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was about to be killed by the sword light. At this moment of life and death, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor admitted defeat without hesitation. Stop! Long Tian, you've won. I admit defeat and am willing to join you to save the Dragon Realm and fight against the invasion of the 5 god emperors. Going against heaven's wrath and going against the 5 god emperors would only lead to death. However, that was a matter for the future. If he didn't agree to Tianqing's request now, he would die immediately. He already had an answer for what to do. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor chose to admit defeat and compromise with Tianqing. However, Tianqing's killing intent and the sword light at his fingertips didn't dissipate. He took out a jade slip and threw it to to the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor as he said expressionlessly, "Words are no proof. I won't believe a cunning old fellow like you. Swear to the heavens according to the contents of the jade slip. I'll only believe you if you swear to the heavens." What? The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's eyes widened in anger. He felt extremely humiliated. Long Tian, don't go overboard. You don't dare to swear. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. That means you're disloyal. What you said just now is false. Since that's the case, I can't let you live. As he spoke, he activated his sword light to kill the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor on the spot. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor gritted his teeth, but he could only suppress his anger and humiliation as he picked up the jade slip. After hesitating for a long time, he finally followed the example of the oath in the jade slip and started to recite it in a low voice. Ji Tianxing had prepared this custom-made oath for the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor before he came to the 7 luminary star. The oath had more than 1,000 words. It was very detailed and complicated, but it covered every detail. As long as the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor recited this oath, he would basically be selling himself. Not only would he not be able to take revenge on Ji Tianxing, but he also couldn't harm Ji Tianxing's friends and family. He couldn't even think of taking back the Star Source continent. He even had to listen to Ji Tianxing's instructions and fight to protect the Dragon Realm. He couldn't back down. Chapter 3975. Today was the most humiliating day of the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's life. Even decades ago, when he was severely injured by Ji Tianxing and had to flee, he was not as pathetic as he was today. This was too humiliating. Once this heavenly Tao oath was established, he would be bound tightly. Even though he was not Ji Tianxing's servant or subordinate in name, this was the truth. As he recited the heavenly Tao oath, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor paused a few times. Every time, he had to take a deep breath and remind himself to calm down. Only then could he calm down. When he was halfway through reciting the heavenly Tao oath, countless streaks of divine light appeared above the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's head. 15 minutes later, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor finally finished reciting the heavenly Tao oath. At this moment, countless streaks of divine light intertwined. The heavenly Tao oath also showed a hazy scene. Thunder rumbled in the sky. Without a doubt, the heavenly Tao oath had been established. It was recognized and supervised by the heavenly Tao. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor originally thought that it was only an oath to the heavens. It would not matter even if he went against the oath. However, when he saw the countless streaks of divine light and felt the hazy, heavenly Tao oath, he lost all hope. Of course, he knew what this meant. After the oath was established, he had to follow it strictly. He could not go against it. Otherwise, the heavenly Tao would punish him and kill him before Ji Tianxing even made a move. After reciting the heavenly Tao oath, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor sat on the altar in a daze. He was so dispirited that he looked like a frosted eggplant. Ji Tianxing kept the jade scroll and stood up. He looked at the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor and said calmly, "Don't cry. I'm not asking you to sell yourself as a slave. Is there a need to be so bitter? As long as you remember the oath and never take revenge on the Myriad Demon Alliance, never make an enemy out of me, and listen to my orders, you will be safe. Moreover, this will only be beneficial to you." His comforting words seemed to make some sense. However, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor would only feel more humiliated. He would not be relieved. Ji Tianxing did not care if the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor had calmed down or not. He continued, "All right, I can only believe you after you made the heavenly Tao oath. Now, you have to do me a favor." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor remained silent as he tried to calm his anger. Ji Tianxing didn't care whether he agreed or not. He ordered, "Use all your men and forces to investigate whether the sky-sealing Dragon Emperor came to the Sirius Galaxy 1,000 years ago. Even if there is no definite news, as long as there are similar clues or deeds, they want me to report it. This prince will give you a month's time to supervise you in handling this matter. If you do this half-heartedly, you should know the consequences. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, who had been silent all this while, suddenly raised his head and asked with a frown, "You want to stay here for a month? Supervise me?" Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "That's right. For now on. You do it now, immediately." After he finished speaking, he sat on the jade chair and leisurely sipped his tea, looking like he was going to stay here and not leave. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was infuriated by Mo Wuji's shameless behavior. However, he just made an oath to the heavenly Tao. If he were to break his oath now, he would be taking things too far. He didn't want to use his life to test the power of the heavenly Tao's punishment. After taking a few deep breaths, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor suppressed his anger. He nodded and said, "All right, I will pass down the order now." He took out a few communication jade slips and sent them to his trusted subordinates, ordering them to start the investigation immediately. Before long, Ji Tianxing's consciousness detected that the few high-level god kings in the God Palace had started to get busy. Those trusted generals, including Marshal Yun Chuan, had started to gather people and sent out many communication jade slips. He believed that the order would soon reach the Star Lords of the various stars. Seeing that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was obediently carrying out the order, Ji Tianxing didn't say anything else. He sat on the chair and closed his eyes to rest, waiting patiently. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor couldn't calm down and couldn't focus on recuperating. He sat on the altar and stared at Ji Tianxing with hatred. He didn't speak or move. However, Ji Tianxing ignored him and continued to meditate with his eyes closed. Time passed quietly. An entire day had passed, but Ji Tianxing didn't change his posture. He was still as relaxed and comfortable as ever. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor stared at him for an entire day, but it didn't work. He couldn't help but feel defeated. He knew that he had already lost to Ji Tianxing in terms of shamelessness. There was no point in continuing to waste time. He could only calm down and start recuperating. Time passed day by day. Every 3 to 5 days, the Star Lords of the various planets would send some scattered messages to him. These news were gathered by a few trusted generals and reported to the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor didn't even want to look at it. He directly passed it to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing looked at the various messy clues and information. He felt a headache coming on and couldn't help but complain for a long time. Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, are these generals and trusted subordinates of yours all brainless? I'm looking for news related to the sky-sealing Dragon Emperor. He is a peak god king. Take a look for yourself. Where are these Star Lords reporting? Don't you know how to select your trusted generals and shove all of them to you for you to make the judgment? It's fine if those Star Lords don't have brains, but even your trusted generals and marshals are so perfunctory. I really feel sorry for you. Look, this is the way the foreign race's god kings do things. They can't be compared to the elites of the dragon realm. To put it bluntly, even a pig is smarter than them. Are you wasting my time? This is an insult to your intelligence. Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Ji Tianxing looked like he was heartbroken. However, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor acted like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. No matter what Ji Tianxing said, he turned a deaf ear. Anyway, I've already done what you asked me to do. As for whether I can do it or not, I don't care. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing was more magnanimous and didn't argue with him. After looking at the scattered news for a month, he could only give up helplessly. Forget it. Send an order to those useless subordinates of yours. They don't have to work anymore. In this month, I've seen tens of thousands of news. I've almost heard the legends of every star. There's so much news, but none of it is reliable. It looks like Master really didn't come to the Heavenly Wolf Star Zone back then. The 1-month deadline was finally over. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, who had been silent all this time, was finally free. He opened his eyes and looked at Ji Tianxing. He asked, "Everyone knows that the Heavenly Dragon Emperor has been dead for thousands of years. Why are you still looking for him? He can't be alive. Your efforts are useless." Chapter 3976. Originally, Ji Tianxing did not want to answer the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's question. However, he changed his mind and decided to dig a hole to trap the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor even more tightly. Therefore, He sighed with a complicated tone. Although the outside world is saying that Master has fallen, I do not see Master's remains and remains. But without seeing Sherzuin's body and relics, this prince will not accept this result. As a disciple, I will do my best to investigate this matter. Also, there is another very important reason. Among the god kings in the dragon realm, Master was the closest to becoming a god emperor. He was the sage of the dragon realm. He once saw through heaven's secrets and understood many secrets. Most of the secrets that I told you before were deduced and investigated by Master. Master's fall is also related to heaven's secrets. It is related to the opportunity to break through to the god emperor realm. The gold origin dragon emperor did not care that Ji Tianxing wanted to find the heavenly dragon emperor's remains. However, since it was related to the opportunity to break through to the god emperor realm and even greater secrets, the gold origin dragon emperor was very attentive and listened carefully. However, Ji Tianxing's words were vague, and he didn't finish his sentence. The gold origin dragon emperor's curiosity was piqued. However, he was left hanging in the air and felt very uncomfortable. However, he did not want to lose face and asked Ji Tianxing for more details. Therefore, he could only suppress his curiosity and ask Ji Tianxing. As far as I know, the heavenly dragon emperor did not come to the heavenly wolf star zone 1,000 years ago. Since you have not found anything here, will you continue to search? Of course. Ji Tianxing answered without hesitation. The gold origin dragon emperor heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed his brows. So, you're leaving the heavenly wolf star zone and going to the heavenly sun star zone to continue your investigation? Yes. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, I've been delayed here for a long time. I will be leaving today. Before I leave, I will remind you to guard the heavenly wolf star zone well and not let the 5 god emperor's puppets take it away. Although you were forced to join us and listen to this king's orders. But if the 5 god emperor's people want to bully you, you can also send a message to this king, and we will try to help you. With that, he tossed over a dozen communication jade slips to the golden origin dragon emperor. The golden origin dragon emperor looked at him and then at the communication jade slip. He was in disbelief. If others invade the Sirius domain, will you really help me? Of course. Ji Tianxing simply replied. This prince has always been very sincere. If you join us, there will only be benefits and no harm. It's just that you're too suspicious and refuse to believe it. The golden origin dragon emperor did not refute and silently accepted the communication jade slip. Seeing Ji Tianxing getting up to leave the secret chamber, he said hypocritically, Since you're leaving, I'll send you off. No need, Ji Tianxing said with a playful smile. When you can be more sincere and less hypocritical, Benoit will find you more pleasing to the eye. The golden origin dragon emperor frowned, but did not refute. I'm leaving. I hope you can understand this the next time we meet. With that, Ji Tianxing turned and left the secret chamber. His figure turned transparent and disappeared. No one noticed when he came to meet the golden origin dragon emperor. Naturally, no one noticed when he left the god palace. Apart from the golden origin dragon emperor himself, no one knew that the Sirius domain lord had been subdued. 2 hours later, Ji Tianxing left the 7 luminary star. He returned to the void, took out the sword of burial of heaven, and continued on his way. Swish! Just like before, the sword of burial of heaven flew through the void. Ji Tianxing entered the sword world and cultivated in the god pagoda. The sword of burial of heaven's dull voice rang in Ji Tianxing's mind again. The golden origin dragon emperor is very suspicious and cunning. Even if you force him to swear the heavenly Tao oath, I'm afraid he won't submit sincerely. Keeping him alive is an uncertain factor and could become a disaster in the future. In my opinion, you might as well just kill him. Ji Tianxing said indifferently. Killing him is easy, but I don't think it's necessary. The 5 god emperors are already above the rest of the world, but they still want to subdue so many god kings to work for them. I want to take revenge on the 5 god emperors and resolve the crisis in the dragon realm. Of course, I can't fight alone. If I can subdue a few more peak god kings, my chances of success in the future will be much higher. Although the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor is very cunning, he's still a dragon. I'm confident that I can rope him in and use him in the future. Since he had already made his decision and was confident enough, the Sword of Burial of Heaven naturally wouldn't say anything more. After a moment of silence, the Sword of Burial of Heaven asked again, "Do you think the Heavenly Dragon Emperor really left something behind before he died?" Ji Tianxing explained, "Others think that I'm looking for Master's relics or some information or secrets. In reality, I just want to know the truth behind Master's death and why he sacrificed his life. I don't know why, but I have a feeling that Master's death is related to me. Moreover, Master must have seen something when he divined the mysteries of heaven for the last time before his death. If I can find some clues and figure out what he saw, it will be very beneficial to us." The Sword of Burial of Heaven sighed and said, "We've investigated the Scorpio and Sirius star regions closest to the Dragon Realm, but we've found nothing. I hope you can find the answer you want in the remaining 7-star regions." After that, Ji Tianxing and the Sword of Burial of Heaven didn't say anything and went their separate ways. The Sword of Burial of Heaven focused on hurrying, while Ji Tianxing focused on cultivating the heaven-punishing divine art to continue improving his strength. Another 4 months later, the Sword of Burial of Heaven left the Sirius star region and entered the Heavenly Sun star region. This star region that had existed since ancient times was slightly smaller than the Sirius star region. There were more than 100 million stars in this star region, and more than 1,000 of them were inhabited by living beings. Previously, when Ji Tianxing killed God King Chongfeng, he refined God King Chongfeng's soul memories and obtained a lot of useful information. Therefore, although he had never been to the Heavenly Sun star region, he had a good understanding of this star region. On the surface, the ruler of the Heavenly Sun star region was a native god king of a foreign race. But in reality, the ruler had been subdued by the 9-sun god emperor more than 900 years ago. Back then, the ruler had just reached the 9th level of the god king realm and wasn't very powerful. After the 9-sun god emperor's guidance and nurturing, he had become a peak god king a few hundred years ago. The Heavenly Sun ruler's true strength was actually the same as God King Chongfeng's. They both had a cultivation base, but no corresponding foundation or strength. Even so, the Heavenly Sun ruler ruled the entire star region with the appearance of a peak god king. No one disobeyed him. At the behest of a 9-sun god emperor, the Heavenly Sun ruler enslaved thousands of worlds and plundered cultivation resources day and night. The living beings of the foreign races in the thousands of worlds were suppressed like lowly ants and suffered unspeakably. Moreover, the 9-sun god emperor had ordered the entire Heavenly Sun star region to erect statues of him so that billions of living beings could worship him and provide him with the power of faith. Chapter 3977. Before entering the Tianyang star zone, Ji Tianxing already knew a thing or two about this star zone. He knew who the master of this star zone was, what kind of background he had, and which star he lived on. Therefore, after entering the Tianyang star zone, he didn't have to waste time investigating these things. The Sword of Burial of Heaven shuttled through the Tianyang star zone, flying past one abandoned star after another, heading toward the depths of the star zone. Currently, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was at the edge of the Tianyang star zone. Most of the stars around it were abandoned stars with no living beings, although some of the abandoned stars contained a lot of ores and metals. However, Ji Tianxing didn't want to waste time devouring these stars. He wanted to reach the depths of the Tianyang star zone as soon as possible to find the Tianyang star zone's ruler. After flying for 3 days, the Sword of Burial of Heaven finally left the edge of the star zone. Most of the stars around it were still abandoned stars, but the number of stars with living beings had also increased. About 100 million miles in front of the Sword of Burial of Heaven, there were a few shining stars with gold, white, and red lights. Those stars had fortresses with spatial barriers, so it was obvious that they were inhabited by living beings. Behind those stars, in the distant void, there were 10 more dazzling stars. Clearly, there were more than a dozen worlds inhabited by living beings of other races. Other than that, the surrounding billions of miles were all abandoned stars. The Sword of Burial of Heaven didn't think too much about it. It had originally planned to pass through this area and reach the depths of the Tianyang star zone as quickly as possible. However, it hadn't expected that a strange phenomenon would suddenly appear in the void. In the dark void behind it to the left, a white light that covered the sky and illuminated a radius of a few 100 million miles. That vast white light was made up of tens of thousands of white light spots. Each white light spot was like a shooting star, with a long white flame trailing behind it. It was very dazzling. Tens of thousands of meteors formed a massive meteor shower, flying through the void at high speed, rampaging through the void. The Sword of Burial of Heaven had just discovered the blazing white light when it saw the meteor shower rushing into the densely packed stars at a terrifying speed. This was despite the fact that those stars were all relatively small and useless. However, each of them had a diameter of over a few million miles, and the larger ones even had a diameter of over 80 million miles. With the powerful impact of the meteor shower, countless cold, wasted stars were blown into smithereens on the spot, spurting out boundless flames. Those fragments also burned as they flew at high speed, turning into more flames and shooting stars. The smaller star fragments flew out for hundreds of millions of miles before burning up and disappearing into the void. As for the star fragments that were relatively larger in size, they shrank rapidly as they burned, leaving behind only condensed star crystals in the end. Those star crystals also became a part of the meteor shower, rushing forward along with the meteor shower. Boom, 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 boom. Just as the boundless white light was about to dissipate, an earth-shattering boom rang out, shaking the void within 1 billion kilometers. Although the Sword of Burial of Heaven was quite far away, it could still feel the destructive power and hurriedly flew forward. At the same time, it used its divine will to send a message to Ji Tianxing, who is still cultivating. The situation is not good. We have encountered a group of meteorites, and it's very powerful. When Ji Tianxing heard this news, he hurriedly ended his cultivation and left the distorted space-time. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, he appeared in the void, holding the Sword of Burial of Heaven in his hand, frowning as he looked at the rapidly approaching meteor shower. In the past, he had traveled the universe many times, so he knew all kinds of dangers in the universe like the back of his hand. He only observed for a moment before he understood the situation, and his expression became serious. Such a large group of meteorites can only be formed after at least a few thousand stars have been destroyed. I don't know what happened in the depths of the void to create such a terrifying meteor shower. The Sword of Burial of Heaven analyzed in a low voice. Even if a few peak godly kings were fighting, it would not be able to create such an earth-shattering scene. I'm afraid that only a large-scale void storm or the disintegration of a star can form such a meteor shower. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment, then added, perhaps a battle between a few god emperors could also create such a situation. A battle between god emperors? The Sword of Burial of Heaven was stunned for a moment and asked with a puzzled tone, aren't the 5 god emperors colluding with each other? Why would they fight each other? Ji Tianxing said with a calm expression, I'm just making an analogy to analyze the formation of this meteor shower. There's no need to take it seriously. The Sword of Burial of Heaven did not continue this topic, and reminded with some concern, even with your current strength, you will be severely injured if you are hit by this group of meteorites head-on. This group of meteorites is extremely fast, and it covers a very wide area, more than 300 million miles in radius. Even if you dodge horizontally now, you can't completely avoid it, but you can brush against the edge of the group of meteorites and avoid its attack at a minimal cost. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, don't worry, I have a top-grade king-level divine artifact to protect me, so I'll be fine. It's just that, looking at the direction this group of meteorites is going, it will definitely hit the dozen or so stars in front of it. There are at least 1 trillion non-human creatures on those stars. Once hit by the group of meteorites, those stars will be destroyed, and the trillions of creatures will also be annihilated. Hearing him say this, the Sword of Burial of Heaven guessed his thoughts and asked, do you want to stop the group of meteorites and save the non-human creatures on those stars? Don't forget, Those are non-human creatures, and they are not related to you in any way. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a smile, "That's right, the non-human creatures on those stars have nothing to do with me. If it were a man-made disaster or a war, I would definitely not interfere. However, the sudden meteor shower was an unpredictable natural disaster. I have the ability to resolve this natural disaster. If I don't save them, I won't be able to live with my conscience." The Sword of Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, and then tried to dissuade him again. "Maybe you have the ability to resolve the meteor shower, but you are also in a very dangerous situation, and you may lose your life. Is it necessary for you to take this risk for the sake of those non-human creatures who are not related to you?" Ji Tianxing sighed and said, "Even if they are non-human creatures, they are still living beings. Besides, the entire Tianyang star zone is enslaved by the Nine Suns God Emperor. Those non-human creatures are already in deep trouble. They are innocent and pitiful." Hearing this, the Sword of Burial of Heaven knew that he had made up his mind, and said in a low voice, "Since you have made up your mind, I won't interfere, but you must act according to your ability." The Sword of Burial of Heaven was only worried about Ji Tianxing's safety, and it didn't care about the non-human creatures' lives at all. "Don't worry, if things don't work out, I will protect myself," Ji Tianxing said through telepathy. Then he put away the Heaven Burial's sword and burst out with his fastest speed. Like a stream of light, he rushed toward the dozen or so stars ahead. Chapter 3978. The 14 planets, led by the 1,000 Blue Planet, had always been peaceful and peaceful. Although the trillions of living beings on the 14 planets were enslaved by the Star Master and the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord, they still had to pay for the daily necessities. Not only did they have to search for cultivation resources day and night, but they also had to worship the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord and the sovereign statue at the beginning of every month. Not only did they have to prostrate themselves on the ground, but they also had to respectfully bow, pray, and recite scriptures for 3 days and 3 nights. In short, they had to worship the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord and the sovereign statue devoutly. This was the only way the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord and the sovereign statue could protect their safety. In the eyes of the living beings from other star domains, this boring and depressing life was oppressive and arduous. However, these ordinary living beings from other races had never been to other stars or seen other star domains. Therefore, although they were suffering, they didn't know how it was. Over the years, most of the living beings from other races had gotten used to this kind of life. Many of the younger living beings thought that this was how life was supposed to be. Today, the people of the 14 planets were working hard as usual. Everyone was busy. Most of them were mining, gathering herbs, planting divine grains, and so on. A few were recuperating from their injuries or cultivating in seclusion. Suddenly, countless people realized that the sky had become a dazzling white. The starlight in the sky had disappeared, and the dark void was no longer visible. They could only see the boundless white light shining from the void, obscuring everything. Ordinary living beings who hadn't become gods couldn't look directly at the terrifying white light. Their eyes were blinded, and they were bleeding. Living beings who had become gods could only vaguely see tens of thousands of light spots in the endless white light. Only experts who had reached the Divine Lord realm could see the truth of the white light. It's a meteor shower. Tens of thousands of meteors are streaking across the void. Thus, after a short while, this exciting news spread across the various stars. The ignorant living beings of other races sang and danced excitedly, cheering in surprise. This was because, in their knowledge, this was a miracle that only happened once in 1,000 years. It was because they were devout believers of the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord and the sovereign statue that they could witness such a magnificent and dazzling miracle. Those who were able to witness a meteor shower with their own eyes would be blessed with good luck, and their wishes would come true. For a moment, the 14 stars were filled with jubilation as the common people cheered. However, the God King experts who controlled the various stars and continents panicked on the spot. Their reactions were completely different from the common people. They knew that it was not a miracle at all. It was a disaster, a catastrophe, because these God King powerhouses all knew that the so-called meteor shower was actually an enormous meteor group. The meteors that were flying at high speed and cutting through the void were the fragments of other stars. Each meteorite contained a terrifying impact force. Often, a meteorite with a diameter of 300 meters could destroy a city. As for the asteroids in the starry sky, every single one of them was no less than 5,000 kilometers in diameter. It was obvious that once their star was struck by the group of meteors, it would surely shatter into pieces and be destroyed on the spot. What was even more terrifying was that the dazzling group of meteorites was approaching at a speed visible to the naked eye. Looking at the direction the meteorites were heading, they would definitely hit the star they were on. Therefore, all the God King experts panicked. They sent out communication jade slips as fast as they could to report the news to the Star Lords and ask for instructions on how to deal with it. At the same time, the Star Lords of the various stars were alarmed by the meteor shower. No matter what they were doing, they immediately put down what they were doing and gathered their trusted subordinates and friends to discuss how to deal with it. After a short discussion, they all came to a conclusion. In the face of this massive and cataclysmic meteor shower, nobody could do anything. Even the Star Lords of the 8th or 9th level of the God King realm were unable to stop the attack of the meteor shower. As for the Zone Master and the Paragon statue that they worshipped, they were even more useless and would never protect them. Therefore, the 14 Star Lords all gave the same order. Run! Before the meteor shower arrives, abandon the stars and run away as fast as possible. Therefore, the Star Lords, their trusted subordinates, and friends emptied the treasury as fast as they could and boarded the divine warship with the cultivation resources that they had plundered over the years. Swish! After the divine warship was activated, it soared into the sky without caring about anything and fled to the distance in a hurry. As for the billions of creatures on the stars, they couldn't do anything about it, nor could they save them. Also, all the Star Lords had guessed the result from the moment they fled. Their stars would certainly collapse under the bombardment of the meteor shower. Fortunately, they had brought their friends and trusted subordinates with them, as well as infinite cultivation resources. After the Star Lords fled, the God Kings who controlled the continents and the top forces also had a premonition that death was coming. Their reactions were the same as the Star Lords. They fled as fast as they could with their families and wealth. About 2 hours later, there was no telling who leaked the news. The citizens, who were still in a state of excitement and revelry, finally knew the truth of the matter. It turned out that the seemingly beautiful and splendid meteor shower was actually a catastrophe. Tens of thousands of meteorites were flying towards the stars that everyone relied on for survival. If a miracle didn't happen, they would be reduced to ashes along with the stars in 4 hours at most. The entire star and all the creatures would perish. Apart from the God Kings and Star Lords who had already fled, no one would be lucky enough to survive. The news spread on the stars at the speed of light. In just an hour, it had spread across the entire star. After all, the people would also use communication jade slips to contact each other. Therefore, the 14 stars fell into panic and despair. The people who had been cheering excitedly a moment ago were now extremely frightened and desperate. On every star, people could be seen fleeing in panic and chaos. Shrill cries and wails echoed in the world. The desperate and helpless people knew that they were going to die for sure, so they abandoned their fear. They cursed angrily, cursing the overlords of the continents and the Star Lords who had abandoned them. There were also some ignorant commoners who, in fear and despair, ran to worship the domain master and the supreme deity statue. They kowtowed and prayed crazily until their heads bled. They were extremely pious. Unfortunately, the statue didn't respond at all. Even the domain lord and the supreme statue that they worshipped as gods couldn't save them. The meteor shower in the void was getting closer and closer. The blazing white light in the sky also became more and more dazzling, making it impossible for people to look at it directly. Even the various stars had become a vast expanse of whiteness. Those who were weaker could no longer see anything. More than 1 trillion alien creatures could only welcome the arrival of death in despair and madness. Chapter 3979. I only have 12 hours. After a few more hours, the disaster will be over. In outer space, Ji Tianxing was teleporting at the speed of light. His figure kept flashing in the void. Every time he flashed, he would teleport millions of miles away. Originally, he would need a day to reach Thousand Blue Planet. However, he did not care about the consequences. He unleashed his strongest power and flew to Thousand Blue Planet in 6 hours. The consequence of teleporting at all costs was that his divine power was greatly depleted. His mind was also extremely tired. His divine body was in excruciating pain. His mind was also stretched to the limit. It gave him a splitting headache. When he reached Thousand Blue Planet, he did not even have time to catch his breath and heal his body before he saw a few spots of light streaking across the void near the planet. Although those spots of light were very small, Ji Tianxing was very knowledgeable. He saw the truth at a glance. It's a divine warship piloted by a divine king. I understand now. The divine kings on these 14 planets realized that they could not defend themselves against the meteors, so they fled on the divine warship. As he finished speaking, the voice of the burial of heaven rang in his mind. The star masters and masters of these planets are all high-level and middle-level divine kings. Of course, they could not defend themselves against the meteors. However, they abandoned the people of the entire planet and fled by themselves. This is indeed despicable. In fact, Ji Tianxing had already expected this outcome. In outer space, the ugliness and darkness of human nature were vividly displayed by many foreign race experts. It would be strange if those star masters did not flee by themselves and stay behind to be buried with the people of the entire planet. Phew! The meteor shower is about to arrive. I have to start preparing. Ji Tianxing did not care about the fleeing divine kings. He turned to look at the rapidly approaching meteors and began his preparations. While he was on his way, he had carefully observed the meteorites and the 14 stars. What comforted him was that the meteors were not horizontally. They were vertically. Almost 100,000 meteors were arranged in 100 million miles wide and 600 million miles long. They were shaped like arrows and spears that had been magnified trillions of times. As for the 14 stars behind him, they were not arranged horizontally. The azure thousand blue star was at the front, and the other 13 stars were behind it. The 14 stars were arranged in the shape of a huge cone. The spear-like meteorite swarm was about to crash into the 14 cone-like stars. The advantage of this was that the contact area between the two would not be too wide, which would reduce a lot of pressure on Ji Tianxing. If the two were to be aligned horizontally, the area of contact would be as wide as 600 million miles. Even he would be powerless to do anything about it. He would only be able to protect a portion of the stars. Ji Tianxing came up with several countermeasures. The first plan was to unleash his full power and use the power of the 3 supreme-grade deity artifacts to build a barrier that was 100 million miles wide. He used this barrier to protect the 14 stars and block most of the meteorites. There were still some meteorites that couldn't be stopped, but they wouldn't collide with the 14 stars. They would brush past the edges of the stars and rush deeper into the void. As for the second plan, he would take the initiative to attack and use the 3 supreme-grade divine artifacts to destroy each meteor. This was safer and could completely resolve the meteorite swarm. However, it would cost too much effort and energy, and the risk was too great. As for the third plan, he would use the power of the supreme-grade king-level deity artifacts and the power of the surrounding stars to move the 14 stars away. As long as he moved the 14 stars away and made way for the meteorite swarm, the crisis would naturally be resolved. However, this plan consumed too much energy and took too long. There was no time at all. If he could prepare a month in advance, it wouldn't be a problem. As for how to deal with it, let's see how strong the impact of those meteorites is first. Anyway, the meteorite belt is 600 million miles long, and there is a gap between each meteorite. I have enough time to deal with it. After thinking about it, Ji Tianxing decided to adapt to the situation. He first took a few king-grade divine pills to regulate his divine soul and divine power. After his divine power calmed down, he took out the 3 supreme-grade king-level deity artifacts. Swish, swish, swish. A pitch-black chaos primordial bell floated to his left. A divine hammer surrounded by 5-colored lightning was held in his right hand. As for Patriarch Qiongqi's indestructible golden body, it had already merged with his body and was shining with a hazy golden light to protect his body. In addition, Ji Tianxing's mind was also connected to the heaven-mending pearl and the Jiuqian 10 Absolutes Tower. If necessary, he could use these 2 supreme-grade deity artifacts to resolve the crisis at any time. In short, he didn't dare to say whether he could block the meteorite swarm and protect the 14 stars. However, he would definitely not be killed by the meteorite swarm. In just half an hour, the dazzling white meteor shower drowned Ji Tianxing's figure. The first meteorite finally arrived and blasted toward him. This meteorite had been burning for an unknown period of time. Its impurities had long been removed, and it had become a sparkling and translucent crystal. This star crystal was more than 10,000 miles in diameter. It burned with a blazing white star flame and had the power to destroy heaven and earth. Ji Tianxing gripped the divine hammer with a serious expression and adjusted himself to the best state. When the star crystal was 30,000 miles away from him, he shouted angrily and smashed the divine hammer with both hands. Boom! A dazzling purple lightning pillar that was hundreds of miles long collided with the star crystal, causing an earth-shattering boom that reverberated in the void. The divine hammer was unharmed, and the purple lightning pillar collapsed on the spot, turning into billions of electric arcs and dissipating in the sky. However, the crystal, which was more than 10,000 miles in diameter and could destroy the heaven and the earth, was also shattered into pieces. Hundreds of pieces splashed out. The crystal-like shards flew in the void for another several million miles before coming to a stop, dragging long white tails of flame behind them. They had used up their momentum, and there was no new power to drive them, so they floated in the sky and lost their threat. Luckily, the impact of these meteorites is similar to what I expected. After easily destroying the first meteorite, Ji Tianxing's furrowed brows relaxed as he felt much more at ease. Even though he had only used a bit of his divine power, 1/10,000th of his power, to destroy a meteorite. However, he didn't dare to let his guard down, and he wouldn't be careless. He knew that there were still tens of thousands of meteorites waiting for him. If he couldn't use his divine power properly, he would probably use up all his power after destroying 10,000 meteorites. After a while, the second meteorite arrived. This meteorite was bigger and had a diameter of more than 50,000 miles. Also, the meteorite burning with white flames didn't have a regular shape. It looked like a huge rock with a dark brown surface. However, this meteorite wasn't coming toward him. It was coming from the left, 100 million miles away from Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing estimated that this meteorite wouldn't hit Qianlong planet, but after flying a few 100 million miles, it might hit the star at the back. Therefore, he controlled the chaotic primordial bell and made it hit the meteorite as fast as it could. Chapter 3980. Ji Tianxing stayed where he was. The primordial chaos bell was like a stream of light as it crashed into the meteorite from the side. 1,000 years ago, he had tried to control his natal divine artifact in the void. He could control the sword tens of millions of kilometers away. The primordial chaos bell had been refined by him for many years. Now, it had become one of his natal divine artifacts and could unleash 120% of its power. In other words, he could control the divine bell to fly tens of millions of kilometers away while standing still, even though the meteorite was still 100 million kilometers away from him. The meteorite was flying diagonally and was only 70 million kilometers away from him. What he needed to do was to calculate the angle and timing of the meteorite's flight, as well as the God clock's angle and timing. This had to be very accurate. There could not be any mistakes. If the angle was wrong or the divine bell speed was too slow, it would be impossible for it to hit the meteorite. It would only brush past it. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing's mind was very strong, and his calculations were accurate. After the primordial chaos bell flew 70 million kilometers, it crashed into the huge meteorite. Even though the meteorite was very large and the impact was very strong. After the primordial chaos bell flew 70 million kilometers away, its connection with his mind was very weak. It could only unleash 70% to 80% of its power. However, he controlled the divine bell to become tens of thousands of kilometers wide and crashed into the meteorite from the side. Therefore, his plan was very successful. Boom! Crack! Amidst the earth-shattering sound, a huge gap was created in the meteorite. Dense cracks appeared, and thousands of pieces of debris splattered out. The meteorite did not collapse and disintegrate. However, more than half of its impact was offset, and it deviated from its original flight trajectory and flew into the depths of the void. Its speed was reduced by half, and it would not hit the 14 stars. In the end, it would hit the way stars in the depths of the void and turn into fragments floating in the void. Ji Tianxing also dealt with the second meteorite. The primordial chaos bell returned as fast as a stream of light. Then, the third meteorite whistled over. This meteorite was on the right side of Ji Tianxing, more than 50 million kilometers away from him. If he did not block this meteorite, it would fly another 300 million kilometers and hit the 7th star behind Ji Tianxing. However, the primordial chaos bell was still on the left side. It was too late to return to Ji Tianxing's side. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing used the same trick again. After calculating the trajectory and speed of the meteorite, he threw the thunder god hammer over. Under the control of his mind, the divine hammer cut through the void like a 5-colored thunderbolt and smashed toward the right. When the godly hammer flew more than 50 million miles, it just happened to converge with the meteorite and collided violently. Boom! With an earth-shattering boom, the meteorite with a diameter of tens of thousands of miles was smashed to pieces by the mountain-like divine hammer. The meteor shattered into thousands of pieces and scattered in the void. Compared to the primordial chaos bell, the thunderclap hammer's attack power was obviously stronger. After all, the focus of these two supreme-grade divine artifacts was different. One had a strong defense, while the other had a violent power. Ji Tianxing easily dealt with the meteorite on the right and looked ahead. At this time, the 4th and 5th meteorites came one after another. He found that many of the following meteorites, 30% of them came from the front and 70% came from the left and right. Seeing this situation, he didn't take back the primordial chaos bell and the thunder god hammer. Instead, he let the two divine artifacts stay in the void on the left and right. The primordial chaos bell was 50 million miles to his left, and the thunder god hammer was 50 million miles to his right. Whenever there were meteorites coming from the left and right, he would control the divine bell and the divine hammer to destroy those meteorites. As for those meteorites that came from the front, he relied on the invincible defense of the indestructible golden body and swung the burial of heaven's sword to destroy them. Boom! Boom! Bang, bang, bang! As time passed, one after another, huge meteorites were destroyed by Ji Tianxing and turned into countless pieces in the void. The meteorites were getting denser and denser. It was overwhelming. Ji Tianxing gradually had no time to rest. He had to do 3 things at once and go all out. He waved his sword to block the meteorites in front of him, and at the same time controlled the 2 supreme-grade divine artifacts to block the meteorites on the left and right. Fortunately, he didn't block all the meteorites. Instead, he selectively destroyed the meteorites that threatened the 14 stars. Even so, the number of meteorites that he had to block and intercept was as many as 70 to 80,000. 2 hours passed. Ji Tianxing blocked more than 10,000 meteorites in succession. His face was pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. His expression was solemn, and his eyes were clear and focused. He didn't dare to be distracted at all. Although he had used up a lot of divine power, and only had half of it left. His mind was tired. But he held on with his strong willpower and took out king-level divine elixirs one after another to quickly replenish his divine power. Just like this, he was tired and worried. Another 4 hours passed. More than 30,000 meteorites were intercepted by him. At this time, his face was as pale as paper. He was sweating all over, and his hands were trembling. Even if he kept taking divine elixirs, it was difficult to replenish the divine power that he had used up. Now, he only had 30% of his power left. Most importantly, his mind was exhausted to the extreme, and even his soul had become extremely weak. He had a splitting headache. His eyes became blurry, and his breathing was chaotic. Intercepting more than 40,000 meteorites consecutively was already beyond his ability. Now, he could still grit his teeth and hold on because of his strong willpower and belief, as well as his extremely deep potential. No matter if it was in his previous life or this life, this was the first time he intercepted such a huge group of meteorites. It was no exaggeration to say that this was not something that a peak divine king could do. No peak divine king would be like him, intercepting the entire group of meteorites by himself. Almost everyone would choose to avoid the attack, retreat, and hide. Seeing that he was extremely weak and still holding on bitterly, Burial of Heaven couldn't help but roar. Don't force yourself anymore. If you continue, you will be seriously injured and even die. You have already sacrificed enough for the trillions of living beings. Give up. In fact, Burial of Heaven had been intercepting the meteorites that were attacking him head-on. It wasn't a supreme-grade divine weapon. It was only a king-level upper-grade divine sword. Ji Tianxing had used it to destroy more than 10,000 meteorites. In fact, it was also injured. The blade was full of cracks and gaps. At this time, it was also in a weak state. Its power was not as strong as before. Ji Tianxing still didn't retreat. He roared in a low and hoarse voice. A man who walks 100 steps is halfway to 90. Although I have intercepted more than 40,000 meteorites, I have only passed half of the group of meteorites. There are still more than 40,000 meteorites coming. Among them, more than 30,000 meteorites will definitely hit those 14 stars. Those stars and trillions of living beings will still be destroyed. If I give up now, then all my previous efforts will be in vain. Chapter 3981. But you've already used up all your power. You'll die if you last another 6 hours. The Burial of Heaven roared anxiously. All along, as the Sword Soul, it had always been very calm and taciturn at all times. Even its words were cold and emotionless. But today it was unexpectedly more talkative, and it even had emotions. It's okay. I have a supreme-grade divine artifact protecting me. I won't die. At most, I'll use up all my divine power and enter a weak state. Ji Tianxing shook his head and continued to swing his sword to block the incoming meteors. If it was before, he could cut this meteor with a diameter of 20,000 miles with one strike. But now he could only cut it in half and neutralize most of the impact. The two halves of the meteor were still as fast as lightning. It brushed past him and crashed in 1,000 blue planet behind him. Boom, boom. In just a few dozen breaths, the two halves of the meteors hit 1,000 blue planets' spatial barrier. Instantly, two huge holes appeared on the blue barrier on the surface of 1,000 blue planet. Countless shards of divine light flew out. The two meteors fell on 1,000 blue planet. One destroyed millions of miles of mountains and forests. The other crashed into the vast sea and created a huge whirlpool of 50,000 miles wide. Huge waves tens of thousands of feet high swept across millions of miles. Several countries and hundreds of cities by the sea were swallowed by the shocking tsunami. Millions of beings were killed on the spot. Ji Tianxing only glanced at 1,000 blue planet situation. He didn't observe it closely. A hint of seriousness flashed through his eyes. He continued to focus on the meteors in front of him. He controlled the two supreme-grade divine artifacts to block more meteors. His divine power was about to run out. He could only absorb the power of the 5 elemental world to quickly replenish himself. As time passed, his condition and combat power quickly recovered. Even so, the five elemental world couldn't replenish his divine power as fast as he used it. He had no choice but to absorb the power of the heaven-mending orb. With the power of the five elemental world and the heaven-mending orb, he lasted another 4 hours. However, the power he used to replenish the five elemental world was basically used up this time. The originally flourishing and rapidly expanding world of five elements had become stagnant and calm, like a pool of stagnant water. Even the brilliance of the heaven-mending pearl was not as dazzling as before. It was slightly dimmer. In these 4 hours, he intercepted another 30,000 meteorites. More and more meteors could only helplessly give up and watch as they rushed into the depths of the void and crashed into the waste stars. One after another, the useless stars were blasted into smithereens, erupting into a terrifying star storm that affected 14 stars. There were also many meteorites that Ji Tianxing was unable to destroy. He only managed to cut them in half and neutralize the huge impact. The shattered meteors flew past him and hit Thousand Blue Star and a few other stars. Many holes and craters appeared in the spatial barriers of the stars. Meteors with flaming tails fell like meteors, causing great disasters on those planets. Tens of millions of miles of mountains and rivers were turned into ruins. Countless cities and kingdoms were destroyed, burned into scorched earth. Hundreds of millions of non-humankind beings had been killed by the impact of the meteors. In the distorted space-time, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, and the others had already finished their cultivation. They gathered together and stood on the jade platform under the sacred tree, using their divine abilities to watch the scene in the void. When they saw that Ji Tianxing was completely drenched, his hair was disheveled, and he was extremely weak, but he was still tenaciously holding on, their eyes became blurry. Ji Tianxing risked his life and blocked the meteors without caring about anything, just to save trillions of people he did not know. This caused everyone to be deeply shocked, respectful, and impressed. Especially Chao Qingyu, Lan Yang Baifeng, and the others. Their emotions were very complicated. Young Master is actually willing to risk his life and save more than a dozen stars for the outsiders who are completely unrelated to him. Such breadth of mind and feelings is truly rare in the world, noble and unparalleled. In the past, I always thought that the stronger a god is, the more emotionless and selfish they are. However, young Master used his actions to prove that the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. Mortals always believe in gods devoutly and pray that gods can protect them. However, too many gods are selfish and indifferent, not worthy of belief and respect at all. Only a god like young Master is worthy of the worship and reverence of billions of people. I can only use one word to describe young Master's actions: great. Although we are weak and can't help young Master, we can't even block a meteor. However, I feel that we can't stand by and do nothing anymore. We also have to help young Master. While everyone was discussing with emotion, Wushuang's face was also full of tears. She clenched her fists and was extremely worried for her father. Mother, why is father so foolish? Those outsiders don't even know him and are not related to him. Why would he risk his life to save them? Ji Wushuang hugged Yin Yao's arm and begged her mother to let her father give up. She did not care if those stars and outsiders would be destroyed because of this. She only cared about her father's safety. She did not want to see her father in such a sorry state, nor did she want to see her father injured. Yin Yao stared at the light screen in front of her. She looked at the vast void and Ji Tianxing's sorry figure. Her eyes were also covered with a layer of mist, and her heart was in her throat. However, she could still maintain her calm and said earnestly, Wushuang, your father was never an ordinary person. He was different. He carried the mission of reviving the human race, and also the mission of saving the dragon realm and the five elements world. Since he recovered to the divine king realm, everything he did was to save the world. In his eyes, the outsiders might be ignorant and uncivilized, but they're also living beings under the heavenly Tao. He has the ability to turn the tide and save the world. so he can't just stand by and watch them die. His love and selflessness is something that no divine king can compare to. Ji Wushuang nodded as if she understood and said, "Although I also know that Father is great, I really don't want to see him injured. Also, doing this will only put his life in danger. There are no benefits at all." Ji Ku held Wushuang's hand and patted her shoulder. He comforted her and said, "Wushuang, with your father's current strength, he doesn't care about any benefits. Also, other than the heavens, I'm afraid no one has the right to give him any benefits or rewards. We humans have an old saying, the heavens are watching what people do. You have to believe that the heavens have eyes. What your father did was a great achievement in saving the world. The heavens will definitely reward him with great merit." Ji Wushuang frowned and asked, "The heavenly Tao will remember Father's achievements and reward him with merit? But what kind of reward is merit?" Ji Ku revealed a faint smile and explained, "Merit is something that can't be explained or explained clearly. But directly speaking, it should be the Tao and the power of the heavenly Tao." Chapter 3982. After hearing Ji Ku's words of comfort, Ji Wushuang felt a little better. She was not an expert or a wise person. She was just a 13-year-old girl, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's daughter. Therefore, she did not have any noble and selfless feelings. She only had the most sincere feelings for her parents. If she had to choose between her father and the billions of living beings, she would choose her father without a doubt. However, if her father decided to do something, even if it meant risking his life, as long as he thought it was worth it and could be recognized and rewarded by the heavenly Tao, she would feel much better. At that moment, Yank, Chao Qingyu, Bai Feng, and the others all suggested that they would help Ji Tianxing. Yin Yao and Ji Ke looked at each other and nodded in agreement without hesitation. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the next instant, everyone flew out of the distorted space-time and appeared behind Ji Tianxing in the void. Not only did Yin Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, White Dragon, Chao Qingyu, Yank, and Bai Feng appear, but even Xianyu, Black Dragon, Lin Shui, and the Blood Illusion God King appeared. Everyone who had followed Ji Tianxing, including those who had reached the God King realm, stood out. Ji Tianxing had just destroyed a meteorite with his divine hammer when he suddenly realized that everyone had appeared behind him. He immediately looked anxious. "What are you doing here? It's too dangerous here. Go back." Although everyone was a God King, most of them were mid-level or low-level God Kings. If they were hit by a meteorite, even if they did not die, they would be severely injured. How could Ji Tianxing not be anxious? White Dragon was very emotional. He shouted excitedly, "Master, we can't let you fight alone. We're with you. We want to fight alongside you." "Nonsense," Ji Tianxing scolded angrily. "Those meteorites are star cores and star fragments. Any one of them can severely injure you. Go back to the Divine Pagoda and stay there." Everyone understood that he had good intentions. Seeing that he was angry, no one dared to say anything. At this moment, Yin Yao looked at him gently and explained, "Tianxing, of course we can't stop those meteorites. However, your divine power has been exhausted and you are too weak. Everyone is worried about your safety. Therefore, we will work together to channel divine power to you and help you persevere. We all believe in you. As long as you haven't fallen, we will be safe." Ji Ku, Bai Long, Ji Wushuang, and the others quickly nodded in agreement. Ji Tianxing hesitated for a moment. He didn't dare to delay or be distracted, so he quickly nodded and agreed. "All right, then all of you stand behind me. Don't act rashly." Having received his approval, everyone was overjoyed and their spirits were lifted. Qianyu snickered. She squinted her eyes and said to Black Dragon, "Did you see that? Yao Yao's words are always effective. The first wife is just different." Black Dragon blinked and sent a voice transmission. According to the human world, shouldn't Yun Yao and Ji Ku be called first wife and second wife? While the two of them were still muttering, everyone had already consciously arranged themselves into a formation. Yun Yao was at the front, followed by Ji Ku. Behind them were Lan, Ji Wushuang, Bai Long, and the others. Everyone worked together to release their divine power. After passing through layers of transmission, Yun Yao sent it into Ji Tianxing's body. Originally, Ji Tianxing was exhausted and his divine power was empty. Now that he had received everyone's divine power, he was immediately invigorated and his divine power became much more abundant. He focused on controlling the divine weapon and swung the Kenshin sword to block one meteorite after another. At this moment, the meteor shower had already reached its end. There were only about 16,000 meteorites left. As long as they could hold on for another 2 hours, the meteor shower would be gone. Ji Tianxing didn't dare to be careless. He focused all of his attention on dealing with the meteorites. Their unity was like an impregnable fortress. As they worked together, their efficiency was greatly increased. One meteorite after another was shattered into pieces by him and fell into the void. Only a few meteorites were abandoned and rushed into the depths of the void, smashing into many useless stars. As a result, loud bangs continuously erupted in the void hundreds of millions of miles away. Those shattered star fragments carried a terrifying force and bombarded a few stars. The spatial barriers of those stars were riddled with holes, and divine light flickered chaotically. The mountains and earth on the stars were also destroyed into ruins. Countless cities and divine kingdoms were destroyed. However, compared to the destruction of the entire star, the deaths of the tens of millions of aliens were not worth mentioning. As time passed, Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others used up too much of their divine power and became weaker and weaker. However, everyone was infected by Ji Tianxing's aura and persevered with their strong willpower. From beginning to end, no one complained about being tired, and no one thought of giving up. After following Ji Tianxing for so many years, they had learned a lot. Not only their experience and knowledge and cultivation, but also their willpower, perseverance, and persistence. Finally, 2 hours later, the meteor shower was over. When the last meteorite was shattered by Ji Tianxing's sword, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone's hair and clothes were drenched in sweat. They looked very tired and weary. However, no one complained or complained. Everyone's spirits were lifted, and their faces were filled with pride and pride. Ha ha ha! We did it! To be able to fight side by side with young Master and save more than 10 worlds, we are proud of you. Although we were fighting for strange creatures, this was a great battle. I feel that my divine soul and character have been elevated. From now on, I am also a noble expert who has saved a world. Everyone was full of smiles and high fives in celebration. Even the weakest and most disheveled, Ji Tianxing squeezed out a smile on his pale face. He turned back to look at everyone and pointed at the dozens of stars that were full of holes. Although those stars are still injured, and those aliens still have a lot of casualties, we managed to avert crisis. However, we have successfully averted a calamity and saved more than a dozen worlds. The heavens have eyes. This is an undeniable achievement and also a great merit. Although no one can obtain any substantial benefits, I believe that your views and thoughts will be broader. In the future, when you become peak divine kings, you will also be able to comprehend the Tao faster and control the power of the heavenly Tao. In fact, this was part of the reason why Ji Tianxing decided to save more than 10 stars. Previously, he forced a few people to swear the heavenly Tao oath, and they were all recognized by the heavenly Tao. This made him very sure that the heavenly Tao did exist, and it was watching over all living beings at all times. Therefore, he wanted to save more than 10 worlds and make a shocking achievement. Even if he could not obtain the heavenly Tao merit, at least he could comprehend the Tao faster and control the power of the heavenly Tao. Of course, this was just a guess and a test. He could not be sure. Just as he finished speaking, a series of muffled thunder sounded in the void without any warning. In the next instant, more than 10 sacred golden light pillars descended from the void. Swoosh! 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 Everyone, who was immersed in excitement and pride, was engulfed by the sacred golden light before they could react. Not only Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others, but But even the burial of heaven was engulfed by a thick light pillar. Everyone's empty divine power immediately recovered at an unbelievable speed. Moreover, all kinds of enlightenment appeared in everyone's mind. Their talent, comprehension, aptitude, and strength had all improved significantly. Chapter 39:83. Such a miraculous change stunned everyone. One had to know that everyone's talent, perception, and aptitude were fixed. Only an extremely small number of heaven and earth treasures could increase a cultivator's attributes. Therefore, after everyone was enveloped by the sacred golden light, their talent and perception skyrocketed, and they could not react in time. After a while, everyone finally came back to their senses and cheered in surprise. Jiku shouted excitedly, "Big Brother Tianxing is right. We have made great contributions and have indeed been rewarded by the heavenly Tao. This is the power of merit from the heavenly Tao." Only then did everyone come to a realization. They were overjoyed and excited. "Oh my God, we have actually been rewarded by the heavenly Tao. Young Master is right. We have been recognized by the heavenly Tao. What a miraculous power of merit. Not only did it save me 100 years of hard work, but it also increased my talent and aptitude. Such a great opportunity is definitely not something that can be exchanged for hundreds of billions of cultivation resources." Everyone was immersed in excitement and ecstasy. Only Ji Wushuang kept staring at his exhausted father and asked in shock, "Father, you have put in the most effort and made the most contributions. Why didn't you receive the heavenly Tao's reward?" Hearing that, everyone was stunned and turned to look at Ji Tianxing. As expected, everyone was enveloped by the sacred golden light. Even the sword of the burial of heaven was no exception. Only Ji Tianxing's surroundings were very calm. There was no power of merit at all. It seemed that not only did he not receive the heavenly Tao's reward, but he had also been neglected and forgotten. Yin Yao, Ji Ku, and the others all had puzzled looks on their faces. They were all puzzled. How could this be? Tianxing is clearly the greatest contributor. Why didn't the heavenly Tao bestow him with the power of merit? This shouldn't be. All living beings are under the watch of the heavenly Tao, and the heavenly Tao is absolutely fair and selfless. Why would it miss him? Something must have gone wrong somewhere. Maybe it's because young master's contributions are too great that the heavenly Tao wants to give him the grandest reward. Yes, that most likely. In the eyes of everyone, they had only helped a little and obtained the power of merit bestowed by the heavenly Tao. With the impartiality of the heavenly Tao, it would definitely give Ji Tianxing the greatest reward. In fact, it was not only the power of virtue that was given to him, but there were also other rewards. Thinking of this possibility, everyone waited for Ji Tianxing to receive the reward while being baptized by the power of merit. Unfortunately, an hour had passed. Everyone had refined their own power of virtue and recovered to their peak condition. Their strength had also increased. However, there was still no movement on Ji Tianxing's side. There was no divine golden light, and there was no sign of the heavenly Tao. At this moment, everyone had no choice but to confirm that Ji Tianxing had indeed been forgotten by the heavenly Tao. How could this be? Isn't the heavenly Tao the most just and selfless? How could I have missed Big Brother Tianxing? Master, do you feel any abnormalities? Or did the heavenly Tao give you any rewards? Everyone felt indignant for Ji Tianxing and asked him about the situation. Ji Tianxing was also very puzzled. However, he was afraid that everyone would be worried, so he comforted them with a calm expression. "Don't worry, everyone. The heavenly Tao is naturally impartial. The reward it gave me is just different from yours." Everyone was skeptical. Yin Yao, Ji Ku, and Ji Wushuang were still a little indignant and felt deeply regretful. Ji Tianxing took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and said, "All right, everyone, don't let your imagination run wild. Quickly return to the pagoda and cultivate in seclusion. The benefits that the power of merit brought to you are far more than this. You have to seriously cultivate in seclusion for a few years and properly digest the benefits brought by the power of merit." Seeing that the void had returned to calm and that there was no danger ahead, Everyone entered the distorted space-time one after another to cultivate in seclusion. Yin Yao and Ji Ku were the last to enter the pagoda. Before leaving, the two of them carefully reminded Ji Tianxing. Tianxing, your strength is now empty, and you are also injured. Quickly follow us to the pagoda to recuperate. Big brother Tianxing, the calamity has been resolved. You don't have to worry about the alien creatures on the dozen or so planets. First, heal your injuries. Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. After comforting them for a while, they entered the pagoda. In the void, only Ji Tianxing and the Sword of Burial of Heaven were left. The primordial chaos bell and the thunder hammer had already flown back to his side and were stored in his body. He forcefully supported his weak body and sat cross-legged in the void. He placed the Sword of Burial of Heaven in front of his knees and took out a large number of divine pills to consume. As he consumed the divine pills to recover his strength, he discussed this matter with the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Although I didn't explain it to you before when I decided to intercept the meteorites and save a dozen or so planets, I had this idea in mind. I wanted to use this opportunity to see if the Heavenly Tao would reward me or let me condense the Tao runes in advance. Facts have proven that I succeeded. I have made such a great contribution and will indeed be rewarded by the Heavenly Tao. However, why can even you be rewarded with the power of merit by the Heavenly Tao? But I don't have any. The Sword of Burial of Heaven knew that although he looked calm on the surface, he was actually very depressed. However, the Sword of Burial of Heaven did not know how to explain to him. He could only say in a low voice, "This matter is indeed very strange. If even you can't figure it out, I can't understand it either. Even if I fought side by side with you, intercepted the meteorites, and saved trillions of lives, I am still a sword spirit after all. But I'm just a sword soul, so how could I be rewarded by the Heavenly Tao? Could it be that the Heavenly Tao has judged me as a living creature?" Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. Then he nodded and said, "That should be the case." The primordial chaos bell and the divine hammer also participated in intercepting the meteorites. However, they don't have weapon spirits, so they didn't receive the Heavenly Tao's reward. But why can't I get the power of merit? Why can't I comprehend the power of the Heavenly Tao and the Tao runes? I took such a huge risk, and it was all for nothing? The Sword of Burial of Heaven tried to analyze. Could it be that the Heavenly Tao has left you out? Or rather, you once interfered with the power of the Heavenly Tao and reincarnated with the memory of your soul. So, you have been excluded by the Heavenly Tao. In his previous life, Kenshin was one of the best among the peak divine kings. He had already mastered a trace of the power of the Heavenly Tao. Before he died, he used the Heaven Punishment Array to interfere with the Heavenly Tao's reincarnation. Therefore, he could reincarnate with the memory of his soul under the protection of the Heaven Punishment Array. Hearing the Sword of Burial of Heaven's reminder, he nodded slightly and said, "Your analysis is somewhat reasonable. Perhaps this is the reason." No. Just as he was about to nod and confirm this answer, he suddenly remembered something. "'Cause situation is similar to mine. Back then, I interfered with the power of the Heavenly Tao and used the Heavenly Star Chain to protect a remnant of her soul to reincarnate in the human world. If the Heavenly Tao has left me out, then she should also be excluded. However, you also saw it just now. She also received the power of merit. This time, even the Sword of Burial of Heaven was confused and speechless. Ji Tianxing guessed many possibilities, but he could only deny them. In short, this matter became a mystery. Chapter 3984. All right, I can't figure this out for now, but there will be an answer in the future. You're too weak right now, and you're still injured. Treat your injuries first. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was still confused and trying to figure out the answer, the Burial of Heaven hurriedly sent him a message. Ji Tianxing thought for a long time, but couldn't figure it out. He could only put this problem aside for now and think about it later. He entered the sword world and returned to the distorted space to treat his injuries. His injuries weren't caused by the meteors. He had used up all of his divine power and overused his potential, body, and mind. He had injured himself. Although his injuries weren't serious, they had damaged his divine path foundation. He would have to recuperate for at least a few years before he could recover. Fortunately, he had more than $1 trillion worth of cultivation resources in his hands. When he was in seclusion to treat his injuries, he didn't lack cultivation resources or divine pills. The burial of heaven flew alone in the void towards the dozen or so stars to check the situation. 12 hours later, the burial of heaven entered the closest star, Thousand Blue Star. Of the 14 stars, Thousand Blue Star was at the front and bore the brunt of the attack. If Ji Tianxing hadn't stopped the meteors, Thousand Blue Star would have been the first to be destroyed. Although Thousand Blue Star had survived, the surface of the star was full of holes. The meteor fragments had pierced through many holes. The burial of heaven circled half of Thousand Blue Star and saw countless ruins and scorched earth. It made a rough estimate. At least 1,000 cities and 700 to 800 million foreign beings had died under the meteor fragments. The surroundings of the ruins and scorched earth could be said to be filled with wails. It was unknown how many foreign race creatures were crying and wailing. But this was only the minority. Compared to the entire Thousand Blue Star, less than 1% of the foreign beings had died. 99% of the foreign beings saw that the void had calmed down and the meteor shower had disappeared. They were overjoyed. Countless people cheered in high spirits, shouting and roaring with all their might, venting the surprise and excitement in their hearts. Although they didn't know how the apocalyptic calamity had disappeared, they were lucky enough to survive. However, they were extremely lucky to have survived. It was worth celebrating for 7 days and 7 nights. Countless non-humankind creatures danced and sang, expressing their excitement. At the same time, many outsiders swarmed towards the statues of the realm masters and paragon deities in the cities like Tidewater. They prostrated themselves on the ground and worshipped the 2 statues, chanting some strange scriptures. In these creatures' eyes, the reason why the world-ending calamity disappeared was because the Domain Lord and Supreme Deity statue had appeared, protecting them and helping them neutralize the calamity. After this incident, their worship of the Heavenly Sun Protectorate Master and the Paragon statue would become even more pious and unswerving. The burial of heaven could clearly sense the fanatical, invisible divine power of faith being released from the bodies of the billions of believers. It was like a trickling river that converged into a river and poured into the 2 statues. For a time, the Domain Lords and Supreme God statues in countless cities became dazzling with golden light. Those who didn't know better might actually think that the Domain Lord and Supreme Deity statue had appeared and released their divine light. The burial of heaven looked on coldly and disdainfully. It only had 2 words to evaluate the outsiders. Ignorant. That was the reaction of the outsiders on Thousand Blue Planet. The burial of heaven couldn't be bothered to look at them and quickly left. Next, it traveled through the void and checked on a few other stars. The planets behind the Thousand Blue Planet were also damaged to varying degrees. Many holes have been punched through the surface of those stars by the meteors and star fragments. Hundreds of millions of people had died on each planet. Many mountains, rivers, and cities had been destroyed. However, compared to Thousand Blue Planet, the casualties on those planets were even smaller. The non-humankind beings on these planets had the same reaction. Seeing that the void had returned to normal and the meteor shower had disappeared, everyone danced, shouted, and danced in excitement. At the same time, many believers of the Domain Lord and Supreme Deity statue madly worshipped the 2 statues to express their gratitude. The Domain Lord and Supreme Deity statue had protected them and helped them resolve the apocalypse. It made them even more loyal and devout. For half a month, Buried Heaven checked the 7 stars and found that the situation was more or less the same. It was a bit tired and couldn't be bothered to check on the other 7 planets. It used to be cold and indifferent to those ignorant, non-humankind creatures. But now, not only did it feel contempt, it even felt a bit disgusted. It felt bad for Ji Tianxing. If it could turn back time, it would definitely try its best to persuade Ji Tianxing not to save those ignorant people. After all, those people were too ignorant. Also, Ji Tianxing didn't receive the heavenly Tao's reward. Half a month had passed in the outside world. Ji Tianxing had been in seclusion in the distorted space-time for 2 years to heal his injuries. His injuries hadn't healed yet, but he had recovered 80% of his strength and was fine. The burial of heaven woke him up with a telepathic message and reported the situation to him. You asked me to check the situation of each planet. I've already checked 7 planets. The situation of each planet is similar. There are only a few casualties. Most people are excited and happy. After reporting the situation of each world, the burial of heaven said, if your injuries are not serious, I suggest you come to the void to take a look. Although the heavenly Tao didn't reward you, the star cores and star debris in the void are also a huge fortune. Ji Tianxing quickly ended his seclusion to heal his injuries and replied with a smile, I've thought about this problem before. It's just that I was weak at that time, and it wasn't suitable for me to refine those things. Now that my injuries are not serious, let's search for the spoils of war first. With that, he flew out of the sword world and into the void. Standing in the void, he looked around and saw that in the void within a radius of 1 billion miles, apart from the 14 planets, there were densely packed star cores and star debris. There were at least a few million pieces of star cores and star debris of different sizes floating quietly in the void, flickering with various colors of light. 80% of those star cores and star debris were meteorites that he had destroyed. The other 20% were formed after meteorites crashed into other abandoned planets. Although only half of the millions of star debris were precious resources and treasures, the other half were not very valuable. But this was already an immeasurable amount of wealth. Ji Tianxing smiled and said excitedly, there are so many star cores and star debris. If I were to refine them one by one, I'm afraid I'll be delayed here for a few hundred years. Forget it. I'll put these things away first and slowly refine them in the future. Therefore, he sped through the void and constantly used his capturing ability to grab star cores and star debris one after another and put them into his spatial ring. The size of each star core and star debris was different. The large ones were 30 to 40,000 miles in diameter, while the small ones were only a few hundred miles in diameter. He ignored those that contained less star power, ores, and metals, and only picked the more valuable ones. Chapter 3985. After an entire month, Ji Tianxing finally finished cleaning up the battlefield. He had collected nearly 2 million precious star cores, crystals, and debris of the stars. His space ring had long been refined to a superior grade king level. The internal space of the ring was a few million miles wide. He didn't know how many resources and treasures it could hold. Even so, his space ring was still filled to the brim. The other 400,000 plus star cores and debris of the stars were stored in the internal space of the primordial chaos bell. After plundering the spoils of war, the void within a few 100 million miles was obviously much thinner, although there was still more than 2 million debris floating in the void. But with the passage of time, perhaps in a few decades, those fragments would drift away. Of course, if the godly kings of the other races on the 14 stars entered the void to pick up treasures, they would also be able to obtain a large number of debris. However, those debris of the stars were slightly less valuable. Ji Tianxing didn't care about them. Next, Ji Tianxing returned to the sword world and began to distribute the star cores, crystals, and debris. The burial of heaven sword continued its journey in the void, heading deep into the heavenly sun-star zone. Its target was the blazing sun star, the star where the heavenly sun-star zone ruler was. In the distorted space-time, Ji Tianxing sat cross-legged under the bloody flame sacred tree and began to count the spoils of war. There were nearly 2 million pieces of debris of the stars, all of which had different grades and values. Ji Tianxing pondered, if he were to devour and refine these debris of the stars, it would take him thousands of years to finish refining them. Even with Yin Yao, Ji Ku, and the others, it would still take him thousands of years. After thinking about it, he decided to choose a portion of the less valuable and less precious debris of the stars to cultivate the 5-element world and replenish the power of the heaven-mending pearl. After all, he had absorbed the power of the five-element world and the heaven-mending pearl when he was fighting against the meteorites. 3 days later, Ji Tianxing selected 1.5 million pieces of debris of the stars and gave them to the heaven-mending pearl to devour. After the heaven-mending pearl devoured the debris of the stars, they would become pure star power and divine power. Half of it would be used to strengthen the heaven-mending pearl, and the other half will be transferred to the five-element world. The internal space of the heaven-mending pearl was very large and could accommodate the entire five-elements world. Ji Tianxing stuffed the 1.5 million pieces of the debris of the stars into the heaven-mending orb and let it slowly devour them. Although it devoured the debris of the stars at an extremely fast speed, it was still able to devour the debris of the stars. However, Ji Tianxing estimated that it would take at least 100 years to digest all the debris of the stars. As a result, the heaven-mending pearl once again lit up with a dense white light. It became dazzling, and its strength was also rapidly recovering. The five elements world was once again engulfed in a divine power storm. The entire world began to rapidly expand and strengthen. Batch after batch of living beings grew up, and batch after batch of geniuses and gods were born. As the elemental world rapidly grew and became stronger, Ji Tianxing sensed that his strength was also steadily increasing. He didn't stay idle either. He focused on using the devouring divine ability to refine those precious star cores and star crystals. The star core and star crystal were the origin of star. They were also the condensed essence of star. Not only did they contain the purest star power, but they also contained divine power of various attributes, as well as high-quality metals and ores. Ji Tianxing refined those star cores and crystals. Not only did his strength increase exponentially, but he also condensed more divine Tao laws. All in all, the value and effect of star cores and star crystals far exceeded that of high-grade king-grade divine pills. Ji Tianxing's harvest this time could no longer be measured by the number of divine stones. Even trillions of divine stones couldn't be exchanged for 2 million pieces of the debris of the stars. This could be considered to be the greatest fortune he had ever obtained in his life. 3 years later, Ji Tianxing's injuries were completely healed. He was in peak condition, and his strength was close to the peak of the 9th Heaven God King realm. At this moment, he wasn't far from the peak of the God King realm. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Chao Qingyu, and the others had been cultivating in seclusion for a few years. They had also digested the power of merit. Everyone's strength, talent, and aptitude had obviously improved. This was especially so for Ji Wushuang, Qian Yu, Hei Long, and Bai Long. They had all increased by a level, reaching the 2nd and 3rd Heaven God King realm. Everyone came out of seclusion and woke up. At this time, Ji Tianxing gathered everyone and gave each of them 10 pieces of star crystals. These are the meteorites that we intercepted previously. They're all star fragments and crystals, and they contain extremely pure and powerful energy. Refine these star crystals, and you will definitely increase your strength greatly. Ji Tianxing explained the origin and effects of the star crystals to everyone. They were very happy and excited. The meteorites that we destroyed previously are now hundreds of thousands of pieces. Doesn't this mean that there are hundreds of thousands of star crystals? What rich divine power of the stars! This is even more powerful than 10 king-grade divine pills. Just this one stellar crystal is worth tens of billions of cultivation resources. What a huge star crystal! It's actually tens of thousands of miles long and wide. It's like a huge mountain range. Oh my God, 10 pieces of star crystals. Will I be able to refine all of them? Probably a few hundred years? None of them were like Ji Tianxing, who had mastered the engulfing divine power and could quickly refine the star crystals. They could only slowly absorb the power of the star crystals, and their speed was dozens of times slower than Ji Tianxing's. Even so, they were still very happy that they had obtained the star crystals. Ji Tianxing encouraged everyone for a while before dispersing to cultivate in seclusion. He continued to refine the star crystals and worked hard to increase his strength to become a peak god king. Time flew by. Unknowingly, the Sword of Burial of Heaven had been flying for 3 months in the Tianyang star zone. It passed through tens of billions of miles of space and entered the center of the Tianyang star zone. It was about to reach the Liang star. At this time, Ji Tianxing and the others had been cultivating in the distorted space-time for 12 years. Unfortunately, he had not broken through to the peak God-King realm even after refining hundreds of star crystals. However, he was only a step away from the peak God-King realm. As for the extent of his strength, it was impossible to estimate at this point. But one thing was certain. Other than the 5 god emperors of the divine world, no one was a match for him. In the dark and cold space in front of the Sword of Burial of Heaven, a dazzling golden star appeared. It was a Big Dipper star with a diameter of a few billion miles. It was as bright and dazzling as the sun. Compared to the hundreds of stars around it, it was a giant with a powerful aura. This was the center of the Tianyang star zone, the Liang star where the Zone Lord lived. The Sword of Burial of Heaven was still a few billion miles away from the Liang star and would arrive in 3 or 4 days. But then, the Sword of Burial of Heaven suddenly woke Ji Tianxing up. There are more than 20 divine warships in front of us heading towards the Liang star. Judging from their route, they seem to be coming from the same stars as us. Ji Tianxing, who had just finished his seclusion, frowned when he heard the Sword of Burial of Heaven's message. Are you saying that the 20 godly warships are the star lords and deity kings who fled in advance when the 14 planets were hit by the meteoroids? Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3986. Ji Tianxing didn't expect to run into the star lords who had abandoned their planets and fled here. They should have escaped from the 14 planets almost a month in advance. They should have entered the Liang star by now. No one knew if the divine warships were too slow or if something had happened along the way to delay them. Ji Tianxing didn't expect to run into the star lords outside the Liang star. How about we kill them all before they enter the Liang star? Burial of Heaven asked Ji Tianxing telepathically while speeding up to catch up with the divine warships. Burial of Heaven despised the star lords who abandoned their people and fled on their own. He wanted to kill them. However, Ji Tianxing stopped him from doing so. He advised, "We're too close to the Liang star. If we destroy the divine warships and kill the star lords, the Liang star will be alerted. Let's follow them into the Liang star and act accordingly." Burial of Heaven understood that Ji Tianxing wasn't worried that the experts of the Liang star would be alerted and join forces to attack him. He was worried that the experts of the Liang star and the domain lord of the heavenly sun star would notice something was wrong and flee in advance. Those god kings of foreign races had no moral integrity. They would run faster than anyone else once they noticed something was wrong. They didn't have any psychological burden at all. Therefore, Burial of Heaven said calmly, "If that's the case, we'll do as you say." A few hours later, Burial of Heaven caught up with the divine warships. It hid its tracks and aura, as if it had become one with the dark void. It was very well hidden. The godly king experts on the 20-plus divine ships had been traveling in the void for 4 months. They let down their guard long ago. Moreover, they were about to enter the Liang star. There shouldn't be any accidents or dangers. Therefore, no one noticed that a pitch-black divine sword was silently following the fleet. Not long after, the fleet passed through the spatial barrier and entered the Liang star. Burial of Heaven followed closely behind. It didn't expose itself or encounter any obstacles. The boundless Liang star had more than 10 vast continents, as well as mountains, rivers, and sceneries with distinct seasons. There were tens of billions of living beings living on each continent. The Liang star should be the most prosperous and populous star in the entire domain of Heavenly Sunday. The fleet of more than 20 divine warships had clearly received orders from the Heavenly Sun Protectorate Lord. Without any hesitation, they headed straight for the blazing sun continent in the north. Ji Tianxing knew that the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord's cave dwelling was located in the depths of the continent, in a secret realm with an excellent environment. Ji Tianxing was quite clear about the situation in the secret realm. After all, Divine King Everwind had been there many times. Each time, he would stay for half a month. After entering the blazing sun star, the fleet slowed down a lot. Obviously, they were too tired to travel. Now, they were completely relaxed. After 7 days, the fleet finally arrived at the heavenly Yang secret realm of the blazing sun continent. The entrance to the mystic realm was located in a sea of white clouds above a snowy plain. The entrance was a huge space array that formed a light gate that was hundreds of meters tall. There were close to 100 guards standing guard on both sides of the door of light. The 2 guard commanders were both mid-level divine kings. These guards were all wearing shiny silver armor, holding halberds in their hands and carrying divine swords at their waists. They looked majestic. The fleet of more than a dozen Star Lords arrived at the entrance of the mystic realm and stopped to be interrogated. The Star Lords didn't need to show themselves. Their assistants and trusted aides naturally came forward to negotiate with the guard commanders. They took out their identity tokens to indicate their identities and intentions. After a short discussion, the fleet was allowed to enter. However, the mystic realm was the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord's cave dwelling. The fleet was not allowed to enter. The 14 Star Lords had to show themselves. They put away more than 20 divine warships and led more than 20 followers and trusted aides into the heavenly Yang secret realm. Ji Tianxing took this opportunity to quietly appear and put away the burial of heaven. Using the same trick, he turned into a speck of dust and attached himself to the armor of a foreign race's divine king. He then followed the crowd into the mystic realm. The mystic realm had beautiful mountains and rivers and was filled with divine power. A bright golden star hung in the blue sky. The Star Lords led their trusted aides and followers into the depths of the mystic realm. They didn't look like stray dogs that had lost their homes. After flying for 300,000 miles, a group of magnificent palaces appeared at the peak of a mountain in front of them. Many foreign race experts and guards could be seen in the palaces, which were obviously designed in a foreign race's style. The 14 Star Lords flew to the peak of the mountain and landed outside the majestic Heavenly Sun Divine Palace. They explained their intentions to the guards guarding the palace. In fact, the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord had already received news that they would be coming today. When he heard the guard's message, the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord immediately ordered for the Star Lords to meet him. The 14 Star Lords gave their followers and trusted aides a few instructions. It was probably because these followers and trusted aides were afraid that they would lose their composure and say the wrong thing, since it was their first time meeting the Domain Lord. Everyone entered the magnificent palace one after another. They lined up in 2 rows and bowed to the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord, who was sitting on the main throne. The Heavenly Sun Domain Lord was a colorful foreign race expert with a tiger's head and an eagle's body. He exuded the aura of a peak god king. The 14 Star Lords and many god kings were very respectful to the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord. Only Ji Tianxing knew that the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord was just for show. However, he didn't show himself. He remained invisible and hid in a corner of the palace, waiting to see what would happen. After the Star Lords bowed, the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord nodded slightly and motioned for them to rise. Then, he laughed heartily and exchanged pleasantries with the Star Lords. Star Lords, you have traveled a long way and spent 4 months to reach the Liang star. It must have been very tiring. I received the news in advance and ordered people to arrange accommodations for you. After the meeting is over, I will send people to take you to rest. The Star Lords also put on smiles and pretentiously thanked him. After chatting for a while, the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord went straight to the point. The 14 planets led by the 1,000 Blue Planet encountered a rare meteor shower. I deeply sympathize with you. I wonder, did the Star Lords transfer their resources and wealth when they left? You shouldn't have left out the Divine King experts of the various stars. Did you bring them all away? Ji Tianxing didn't expect that the Heavenly Sun Domain Lord wouldn't even bother to put on a show. He didn't ask about the casualties of the 14 planets, nor did he try to comfort them. Instead, he asked these questions directly. The The 14 Star Lords were used to it and didn't find it strange. The 1,000 Blue Planet Lord took the lead to report the situation, and the other Star Lords followed suit. Sir, only 3 God Kings were left from the 1,000 Blue Planet. A total of 15 God Kings escaped. I have brought 80% of the cultivation resources and wealth I collected over the years. Sir, only 3 of the 12 God Kings from Mo planet were left. 70% of the wealth and resources were transferred. Sir, 13 God Kings from the vast star were left. 70% of the resources were transferred. Wonderful book house.